I was house sitting alone. Then the dog found someone hiding in the closet. This happened 2 winters ago, and I still check every closet in every house I walk into. I can't help it anymore. It's just something my body does now. My name is Reese. I was 23 at the time, living in Bellingham, Washington. That gray little city up near the Canadian border where it rains about 9 months out of the year. I'd just dropped out of my second attempt at community college. And I was broke in that specific way where you start counting the change in your car's cup holder like it matters. So when my mom's coworker, a woman named Diane, offered me $300 to house sit for a long weekend, I said yes before she even finished the sentence. Diane and her husband owned this big custom house up on Chuckanut Drive, the kind of place built into the side of a hill with windows facing the water. Way out of my world. They were flying to Phoenix for some anniversary thing. 4 nights. And they needed someone to watch the house and, more importantly, their dog, a big German shepherd named Otto. The job seemed almost insultingly easy. Feed Otto twice a day, walk him, bring in the mail. Don't throw any parties. Which honestly, who was I going to invite? Diane walked me through everything the afternoon before they left. She was nice, a little nervous, the way people get when they're handing a near stranger the keys to everything they own. And then, right before she left, she told me the rule. She said it kind of fast, like she was embarrassed by it. She said, "Otto sleeps in our bedroom, in his crate, every single night. Doesn't matter what he does. Doesn't matter how much he whines. He stays in the crate, and the bedroom door stays shut until morning. That's how he is. He gets weird at night otherwise." I remember thinking it was a strange thing to be so specific about. But people are strange about their dogs, so I just nodded and said no problem. The first 2 days were genuinely nice. I'm not going to pretend they weren't. I had this enormous house to myself, a fridge full of food that wasn't mine, and a dog who turned out to be the best company I'd had in months. Otto was huge but gentle, the kind of dog that leans his whole weight against your leg when you stand still. During the day, he followed me everywhere, room to room, never more than a few feet away. It rained the whole time, of course. That soft, constant Pacific Northwest rain that you stop hearing after a while, because it never stops. At night, I'd put Otto in his crate in the master bedroom, shut the door like Diane said, and go sleep in the guest room down the hall, and he'd be fine. A little whining at first, then quiet. The 3rd night is when it changed. I'd gone to bed around 11. I was just starting to drift off when I heard Otto, not whining, that low, chest-deep growl that big dogs do, the kind you feel more than hear. It was coming through the wall from the master bedroom. I lay there and listened. He'd growl, stop, growl again. After about 10 minutes of it, I figured maybe he needed to go out, or maybe a raccoon was on the deck. They get bold up there. So I got up, walked down the hall, and opened the master bedroom door. The second I opened it, Otto went silent, completely. He was standing up in his crate, totally rigid, ears forward, and he wasn't looking at me. He was looking past me, across the dark bedroom, at the closet, one of those big walk-in closets with double doors, both shut. I stood there feeling stupid. It's a closet. I even said it out loud, kind of laughing at myself. It's a closet, buddy. But Otto didn't relax. He kept staring at those doors, and that low growl started up again. Quieter now, almost continuous, like an engine idling. I'll be honest with you. I did not open that closet. I want to say I did, that I was brave about it, but I didn't. Something about the way that dog was staring made the back of my neck go cold. Instead, I told myself it was nothing. I shut the bedroom door. Otto inside, like the rule said, and I went back to the guest room, but I didn't sleep much. I lay there listening to that growl come and go through the wall until, sometime before dawn, it finally stopped. In the morning, everything felt normal again. Sunlight, what little there was. Otto bounding around wanting breakfast. I let him out of the crate, and he ran straight to the master bedroom closet, sniffed all along the bottom of the doors, then lost interest and trotted off to eat. I told myself I'd imagined how scared I'd been. Old houses make noises. Dogs are weird at night. Diane had said so herself. I almost didn't tell you the next part because it's the part where I should have known better. That afternoon, I noticed something while I was bringing in the mail. There was a side door, off the laundry room, that led out to a covered area where they kept the trash bins. I was pretty sure I'd locked it the first night. I'd gone around and checked every door. I'm careful like that. But it was unlocked now, not open. Just unlocked, the little thumb turn flipped sideways. I stood there with the mail in my hand, trying to remember if maybe I'd used that door and forgotten. I didn't think I had, but I wasn't 100% sure. And that's the thing about being alone in a house that isn't yours. You start to doubt your own memory, so I locked it, double-checked it, and tried to forget about it. That night, the fourth and last night, I made a decision I'm still not sure about. I decided that if Otto growled again, I was going to actually look in that closet. I'd feel like an idiot otherwise. Driving home the next day having scared myself over nothing. I even brought a flashlight to bed, one of those heavy metal ones from the kitchen drawer. I didn't have to wait long. It was a little after midnight when the growling started. Same as before, low, steady, coming through the wall. But this time there was something else mixed in. A sound I couldn't place at first. A soft, rhythmic bump, 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 like something tapping slowly against the inside of a wall. I got up. My heart was going, but I told myself I'd made a decision, and I was going to keep it. I walked down the hall, flashlight in hand, and opened the master bedroom door. Otto was exactly like the night before. Up, rigid, fixed on the closet. But now he wasn't just growling. The second I stepped into the room, he started barking, full volume, throwing himself against the front of the crate so hard the whole thing slid an inch across the floor. I'd never seen a dog do that. It scared me almost more than anything else, because Otto was the gentlest animal I'd ever met, and now he looked like he wanted to kill something. And the closet doors, they weren't shut all the way anymore. They'd been shut that morning. I was sure of it. Now there was a gap between them, maybe 4 inches, just darkness in the middle. I want to tell you I opened that flashlight and shined it in and faced whatever it was. But I didn't, because while I was standing there, frozen, with Otto screaming behind me, the gap between those doors got wider. It didn't swing open, it moved slow, maybe an inch, like something on the other side was easing it open to see me better. I ran. I left the flashlight. I left the bedroom door wide open. I didn't even think about it. I just grabbed Otto's crate door, flipped the latch, and that dog exploded out past me toward the closet. I didn't stay to watch. I went straight down the stairs, out the front door, into the rain in my socks, and I sat in my car with the doors locked and the engine running and my phone in my hand. I could hear Otto inside, barking, then this awful scrabbling, claws on hardwood, the sound of something heavy hitting a wall. And then, and I've thought about this so many times, I heard the side door, the one off the laundry room. I heard it bang open against the outside wall, hard, and then nothing. I sat in that car until the sky started going gray. Otto came to the front window at some point and just stood there looking out at me, calm, like nothing had happened. When I finally worked up the nerve to go back in, the house was quiet. The master bedroom closet was wide open and empty. Just clothes, shoeboxes, the normal contents of a normal closet. But the side door off the laundry room was standing open. And on the floor of that closet, in the thin layer of dust along the back where nobody ever cleans, there were 2 clear impressions. Like the shape of where someone had been sitting, knees drawn up, waiting. Diane and her husband got home that afternoon. I didn't tell them everything. I told them Otto had a rough couple of nights, that he'd been barking, that maybe a raccoon got into the crawl space. Diane just nodded slowly and didn't seem surprised at all. As I was leaving, she handed me my $300, and she said, "And this is the part that I can't let go of." She said, "Thank you for keeping the bedroom door shut. He always knows when something's wrong before we do." I never asked her what she meant by always. I drive past Chuckanut Drive sometimes. I don't look up at the house, and every place I've lived since then, the first thing I do when I move in, before the boxes, before anything, is open every closet, every single one, and leave them open, because I keep thinking about those 2 marks in the dust. knees drawn up, like somebody used to it, like somebody who'd done it before. A creepy man followed me home from the hospital. Then I found out he was in my back seat. I've worked night shifts for almost 6 years now. And the one thing nobody tells you about working nights is how you stop trusting parking lots. Any parking lot, even in the daytime. This is the reason why. My name is Marisol. I work as a registered nurse at a mid-sized hospital in Spokane, Washington, east side of the state, the dry side, where the winters get genuinely brutal. Back when this happened, I was 28, and I worked the 7 p.m. to 7 m shift in the medical surgical unit. 3 nights on, then off, then back again. Your body never really adjusts. You just learn to function inside a kind of permanent fog. The hospital parking structure was this old concrete thing, 5 levels, attached to the building by a covered walkway. At night, they only kept the bottom 2 levels lit to save money, and security was basically one guy named Gerald, who, I'm fairly sure, slept in the booth most of the shift. We all parked on the 2nd level, because the first one flooded when it rained. So every morning at a little after 7, exhausted, I'd walk out to my car on level 2 in the half dark. That morning, it was a Thursday in February. I remember because it was the end of my 3-night stretch, and I was running on almost no sleep. That morning, I noticed the man. He was standing near the stairwell on level 2. Just standing. Older guy, maybe 50s, wearing a tan jacket that was too thin for the cold, and he had this stillness about him that I clocked immediately. Nurses get good at reading people fast, and everything about him read wrong. He wasn't waiting for anyone. He wasn't on his phone. He was just standing very still, watching the cars. When I came out of the walkway, he turned and looked at me. And he didn't look away. Most people, when you catch them looking, they break it off, embarrassed. He just kept looking, slow, all the way from my face down to my shoes and back up. I put my head down and walked faster to my car. I got in, locked the doors immediately. That's just a habit from working nights. And as I was backing out, I looked over and he was gone. Not walking away, gone. Like he'd stepped behind a pillar. I told myself he was probably some patient's relative who'd gotten turned around looking for the exit. Hospitals are full of people having the worst day of their lives. I drove home and slept and didn't think about him again until my next stretch of shifts 3 days later. And he was there again. Same spot, near the stairwell, same tan jacket. This time it was the start of my shift around 6:45 in the evening, and I was walking in from my car. He was standing between me and the walkway, not blocking it exactly, just there. I had to walk past him to get inside. As I did, he said something. Quiet, almost friendly. He said, "Long shift tonight?" I just said yep without slowing down and went inside, and my heart was hammering, because how did he know I was working a shift? I wasn't in scrubs yet. I changed at the hospital. I was in a hoodie and jeans. There was no way to know I worked there unless he'd seen me before. Unless he'd been watching long enough to learn my schedule. I almost told Gerald, the security guard. I want you to know that I almost did. But I talked myself out of it the way you do. What was I going to say? A man said 4 words to me? He hadn't touched me, hadn't threatened me. I'd sound paranoid. So I went up, started my shift, and tried to shake it. But it sat with me all night. And by the end of the shift, around 5 in the morning, I'd made a plan. When I left, I was going to have Gerald walk me to my car, just to be safe. Except that morning was chaos. We had 2 codes back to back near the end of the shift. A patient crashed, and by the time I finished charting and handed off, I was 40 minutes late leaving and completely wrecked. I forgot all about Gerald. I just wanted to get to my car and get home and sleep. The fog, like I said. I walked out to level 2. It was empty. No tan jacket man. I actually felt relief, this big wave of it, and I almost laughed at myself for being so worked up. I got to my car, unlocked it, got in, locked the doors, and sat there for a second, just breathing, the way you do after a hard shift. And that's when I smelled it. Cigarettes. Stale cigarette smoke, strong, coming from behind me. I don't smoke. Nobody who'd been in my car smoked. The smell was so out of place that my brain snagged on it before I even understood what it meant. I looked up at my rearview mirror. There was a shape on my back seat. In the dark, low, pressed down behind the driver's seat. I could see the top of a tan shoulder. I could see part of a face, turned toward the mirror, looking at me, looking at him. I want to tell you I screamed or did something smart. I didn't. I froze completely, both hands on the wheel, staring at the mirror, and for 1 full second neither of us moved. And then he smiled. I saw it in the mirror. He smiled like he'd been waiting a long time and was finally comfortable. What saved me is that I had never put my seatbelt on, and the door was right there, and my body just went. I yanked the handle. The lock was still down, so it didn't open the first time. And I heard him move behind me, heard the seat creak, felt a hand brush the shoulder of my jacket. I flipped the lock and threw the door open and fell out onto the concrete, scraping both my palms, and I ran. I ran for the stairwell, screaming Gerald's name, screaming anything, just noise, all the way down to the booth on level 1. Gerald was actually awake. He came up with his flashlight, and by the I got back to level 2, my car door was hanging open, the dome light on, and the back seat was empty. The police came. They were kind about it, but I could tell they didn't fully know what to do with it. There was no break-in. The car hadn't been damaged. They figured he'd somehow gotten in while I was on shift, maybe Slim Jim'd the lock, and waited. Hours, they thought. He'd been lying on my back seat for hours, in the cold, waiting for me to finish my shift and get in. Here's the part that stays with me. When I'd parked that evening, before my shift, I remembered being annoyed because the car beeped its little double beep when I locked it. I always lock it. It was locked. There's no way he got in while I was working, which means he was already in there when I drove to work that night. He'd been in my back seat on the drive in, the whole 20 minutes, lying behind me in the dark while I sang along to the radio, and had no idea. He'd ridden to the hospital with me, and he was just waiting to ride home. They never caught him. I gave a description, the tan jacket, the stillness, but nothing came of it. I moved apartments. I sold that car. And to this day, every single time I get in any vehicle, before anything else, I turn around and I look at the back seat. Every time. Because I learned that the dangerous part isn't the parking lot. The dangerous part is the moment you finally feel safe, when you've locked the doors and you're breathing easy. That's the moment he was counting on. I delivered food to an apartment, but they locked me inside. I don't do food delivery anymore. I quit the week after this happened, and I've never gone back, even when money got tight. Some jobs aren't worth the $20. This one almost cost me a lot more than that. My name is Devin. I was 25, living in Tacoma, Washington, doing delivery driving full-time because I'd lost my warehouse job, and the app work was the fastest way to make rent. If you've never done it, let me tell you, it's lonelier than it looks. You spend your whole night driving to strangers' doors, handing them a bag, and driving away. Most nights, you barely say 10 words to another person. You just chase the next ping. This was a Sunday night in October, around 10:30, rain coming down steady the way it does there. I was about to clock off when one last order popped up. Decent payout, almost $18 with the tip already attached, which is high. People don't usually pre-tip that much. The pickup was a late-night burger place I knew, and the drop-off was an apartment complex over on the east side that I didn't know as well. Older buildings, kind of run down, the kind of place where half the exterior lights are burned out. I grabbed the food, drove over, and parked. The complex was 3 stories, exterior walkways, the units opening straight to the outside like a motel. The order was for Unit 312, top floor, back corner. The delivery note said, and I remember it exactly. It said, "Door is unlocked. Please bring inside and leave on kitchen counter. Don't knock, baby sleeping." Now, that's not super unusual. People leave notes like that. Don't ring the bell, dog gets scared, leave it by the gnome, whatever. But the bring it inside part, that I didn't love. We're told not to enter people's homes. But it was 18 bucks, and it was my last order, and I was tired, and the rain was coming down, so I went up. The walkway to 312 was the darkest part of the whole complex. The light outside the unit was out. Every other window I passed was dark too. It was late. People were asleep. When I got to 312, the curtains were drawn, but there was a faint light behind them, like a TV or a lamp in a back room. I tested the door handle, and, sure enough, it was unlocked. I should have just left the bag on the mat and texted them. I think about that a lot. Instead, I did what the note said. I opened the door and stepped just inside, into the entryway, planning to set the food on the counter and get out in 5 seconds. The apartment was warm and it smelled like nothing. That's the first thing that struck me as odd. Now that I think back, it didn't smell like a home. No cooking, no candles, no people smell, just warm, empty air. The living room was mostly dark except for a lamp in the far corner. There was a couch, a coffee table, and that was about it. No TV, even though I'd thought I'd seen one flickering. No baby stuff, no shoes by the door. It looked like a place nobody actually lived in. I found the kitchen counter to my left and set the bag down. And right as I did, behind me, I heard the front door close. Not slam, close. Soft, deliberate, and then the unmistakable sound of the deadbolt turning. Thunk. I turned around, and there was a man standing in front of the door. He'd been behind it the whole time. Behind the door as it opened, so when I walked in, I'd walked right past him. He was maybe 40 average, in a plain gray t-shirt and sweatpants, and he wasn't doing anything threatening. He was just standing in front of his locked door, between me and the only way out, looking at me with this calm, pleasant expression, like he was glad I was there. "Hey," he said, "thanks for coming up. You want some water? You look soaked." I said no thanks, I had to go. I had other orders, which was a lie. It was my last one, but it just came out. I started moving toward the door, and he didn't move out of the way. He just kept that same friendly face and said, "Stay for a minute. It's nasty out there. Just dry off." Everything in me went cold, because his voice was completely normal and his words were almost nice, but he was not moving away from that door, and the deadbolt was turned. And there was no baby, no family, no reason for any of this. I'm not a big guy, and I'm not a fighter. What I am is loud. I work nights. I've had a couple sketchy deliveries before, and a driver I used to know told me once, if something ever feels wrong, don't try to be polite. Don't try to reason. Just make as much noise as humanly possible. Because guys like that count on you being quiet and embarrassed. So I didn't reason with him. I just started yelling. As loud as I have ever yelled in my life. "Help! Somebody call the police. Help!" And I picked up the closest thing on the counter, which happened to be the bag of food I'd just set down, and I threw it at him and went for the door anyway. It rattled him. Just for a second, his calm face cracked into something else, something angry, and he grabbed for me, got a fistful of my jacket. But I was already screaming and twisting, and the deadbolt was the simple kind, just a thumb turn. And I got it with my other hand. The door flew open, and I half fell out onto the walkway, still yelling, and down below I could see a light come on in another unit. Somebody's porch light, somebody's door opening. I didn't wait. I went down those stairs, 3 at a time, ran to my car, locked it, and drove out of that lot so fast I clipped the curb. I called the police from a gas station a few blocks away, shaking so hard I could barely hold the phone. Here's the thing that I can't shake, even now. When the police looked into it, the order, the address, Unit 312 was listed as vacant. It had been empty for 2 months. The previous tenants had moved out. There was no lease, no power account in anyone's name, which didn't even make sense because the lamp had been on, and the order itself on the app. The account that placed it had been made that same night, with a prepaid card, and the delivery instructions. The baby sleeping, doors unlocked, bring it inside. All of it was designed to get a driver, any driver, alone, inside, with the door shut behind them. It wasn't about me. He didn't know me. He'd just ordered food to an empty apartment he'd somehow gotten into, and he was waiting to see which one of us the app would send. I got lucky because I was loud, and because his door had a cheap lock, and because Somebody's porch light came on at the right second. I think about the drivers who are quieter than me, who'd have been polite, who'd have accepted the glass of water. They never found him. The app could connect the prepaid card to a real identity. As far as the police could tell, he just walked out sometime that night and was gone. I quit the next week, and now, anytime I'm about to walk into a space I don't know, anybody's place, anywhere, I check behind the door first, always behind the door, because that's where he was. Standing perfectly still in the dark, waiting for me to walk past him so he could close it. A stranger at a gas station warned me not to take the road. He saved my life. I don't believe in ghosts, premonitions, or any of that stuff. I've spent most of my life looking for practical explanations for things. But there's one night I still can't explain, no matter how many times I've tried. My name is Cole. I was 29 when this happened, working as a long-haul parts courier out of Lewiston, Idaho. Most of my routes took me through rural highways at night, delivering machine parts, tractor components, and auto parts to shops scattered across small towns and farming communities. The job paid well enough, but it meant spending a lot of time alone. After a while, you get used to empty roads. You stop noticing the darkness. You stop thinking about how far away the nearest person might be. That confidence almost got me killed. It happened in late September. I had a delivery scheduled for a repair shop outside Grangeville. It wasn't a difficult route. I'd driven it dozens of times before. The fastest way, there was a 2-lane highway that cut through miles of isolated countryside. Around 11 that night, I stopped at a small gas station to fill up before heading into the hills. The place was exactly what you'd expect from a rural Idaho station. 2 pumps, 1 flickering sign, tiny convenience store. The only other vehicle there was an old pickup truck parked off to the side. An older man stood beside it. At first, I barely noticed him. He looked to be around 60, maybe older, lean build, gray hair, canvas work jacket, nothing unusual. I started pumping gas and checked a few messages on my phone. A minute later, I heard footsteps approaching. I looked up. The older man had stopped a few feet away. He nodded toward my truck. "You heading up toward Grangeville?" I said I was. He stared at the highway for a second before speaking again. "Don't take that road tonight." His voice wasn't dramatic. That was the strange part. He sounded completely calm, like someone reminding you to buy milk on the way home. I laughed slightly. "Why not?" He shrugged. "Just take the long way through Cottonwood." I checked my watch. That adds almost an hour. "I know." There was a pause. Then he looked directly at me and said, "Do it anyway." I remember feeling irritated. I asked if there had been an accident, road construction, fluting, anything. He shook his head. Then he said something that stayed with me. "There's somebody working that road tonight." I frowned. "What does that mean?" The man looked tired. Not scared, not nervous, just tired. Finally, he said, "You don't want to be the one who finds out." Then he turned, climbed into his truck, and drove away. No explanation. No warning beyond that. Just gone. For the next few minutes, I sat in my truck arguing with myself. The logical part of me said the guy was probably some local eccentric. Maybe he'd heard rumors. Maybe he was bored. Maybe he was messing with me. But something about the way he'd said it bothered me. There was no performance. No attempt to scare me. Just certainty. Eventually, against my better judgment, I decided to take the longer route. I remember feeling stupid almost immediately. The Cottonwood Road was empty. Nothing happened. No danger. No strange vehicles. No masked strangers. Just rain, darkness, and wasted time. I made my delivery a little after 1 in the morning. The mechanic receiving the package barely looked awake. I got my paperwork signed and started the drive home. Around 2 in the morning, my route eventually connected with the lower section of the very highway I'd been warned about. And that's where everything changed. As I approached the intersection, I saw flashing lights. Red, blue, lots of them. The entire road ahead was blocked. 2 sheriff's vehicles sat across both lanes. An ambulance was parked farther back. Yellow tape stretched across part of the roadway. A deputy stood in the rain, directing traffic toward a detour. I rolled down my window as I approached. "What happened?" The deputy looked exhausted. His uniform was soaked. For a second, he seemed unsure how much he should say. Then he leaned closer. Listened carefully. His tone immediately got my attention. He pointed toward the closed road. "A vehicle was intentionally blocking traffic up there tonight." I felt my stomach tighten. The deputy continued. "Whoever set it up positioned it sideways across both lanes, hazard lights on, made it look like a breakdown. I already knew where this was going. People stop for stranded motorists. Most people would." The deputy glanced back toward the flashing lights. Then he lowered his voice. "We've already had 2 vehicles come through here tonight that shouldn't have." I stared at him. What happened to them? The deputy held my gaze for a second. Then he shook his head. "Keep driving." The way he said it told me everything I needed to know. I rolled my window up. My hands felt cold on the steering wheel. As I followed the detour signs back toward the highway, I couldn't stop thinking about the old man. He'd known, hours earlier, before the road was closed, before the police showed up, before any public warning existed. He knew. The next day I searched local news reports. There wasn't much information. Just a brief article mentioning an active investigation and temporary road closures. No details, no specs, nothing. The story disappeared after that. No updates, no arrests, no explanation. I tried to convince myself the old man had simply heard rumors. Maybe locals knew something dangerous had been happening on that road. Maybe he'd seen suspicious activity on previous nights. Maybe he was just looking out for a stranger. That's probably the truth. It's the explanation I prefer. But every now and then, usually when I'm driving alone at night and rain is hitting the windshield, I think about how calm he was. Not worried, not frightened, certain, like he already knew exactly what was waiting up there. I never saw him again, never saw the pickup, never learned his name. All I know is that I took the long way home. And according to the deputy, 2 drivers that night didn't get the same chance. So whenever I stop at a lonely gas station after midnight and see someone standing beside an old truck, I pay attention. Because one stranger's warning is the only reason I'm still here to tell this story. I delivered food too, an empty office building. 3 men were waiting upstairs. People think the scariest deliveries are to bad neighborhoods. They're not. The scariest one I ever did was to a clean, modern office building in the nicest part of town, and I've never been able to explain to anyone why it shook me as badly as it did. My name is Tessa. I was 26, living in Boise, Idaho, picking up delivery shifts at night on top of my day job, because I was trying to dig out of some credit card debt I'd gotten myself into. I mostly worked the late hours, 9 to 1 or so, because the tips were better and the roads were quiet. I'd been doing it about 8 months, long enough to think I'd seen all the weird versions of the job. I hadn't. This was a Tuesday in November, close to midnight, cold, that fine rain that's almost mist. I got an order from a sushi place that was about to close, a big order, like $140 of food, 6 or 7 entrees, the kind of order in office places when people are working late. The drop-off was a business park on the edge of downtown. Glass and steel buildings, manicured landscaping, the whole thing. The delivery note said to come to the main lobby of Building C and that someone will meet you. A $140 order means a good tip, and a business park feels about as safe as it gets, so I wasn't worried at all. I drove over. The business park was completely dead. It was late. It was a Tuesday. Every building was dark. Building C had a big glass lobby, and there was exactly 1 light on inside it. Just the lobby, the rest of the building above it black. I parked and grabbed the food, which was heavy, 2 big bags. As I walked up to the glass doors, I could see into the lobby. Nice furniture, a reception desk, all of it empty. The doors were locked. I stood there holding $140 of sushi, wondering what to do. And then I saw, taped to the inside of the glass, a handwritten sign. It said, "Delivery. Elevator to 4th floor, suite 410. Doors open, come up, and the lobby door, when I pulled it again, was actually unlocked now. Or it had been all along and I'd pulled the wrong one. I don't know. I'll tell you exactly what was going through my head, because I think it matters. My first thought wasn't fear, it was irritation. I didn't want to lug 2 heavy bags up to the 4th floor of an empty building at midnight. We're not supposed to go up into buildings. We leave it at the lobby or the door. But there was nobody to hand it to, and it was a big tip, and I figured a late working office is a normal thing. People pull all-nighters. So I went in, found the elevator, and rode it up to 4. The 4th floor hallway was dark except for emergency lighting. Those dim little fixtures near the floor. Every office along the hall was glass-fronted and black inside. Empty desks, dark monitors. The whole floor was clearly not in use that night. The only light was coming from one suite at the very end, 410. The door was propped open a few inches, light spilling out into the hall. And I stopped, because now something was wrong, and I could feel it, even if I couldn't name it. There was no sound. A real office where people are working late at midnight has sound, music, typing, somebody on a call, the hum of life. This was silent. Just one room lit up at the end of a dead, dark floor. Door cracked open, waiting. I almost set the bags down right there in the hall and left. I want you to know I almost did. But I'd come all this way, and this is the part I'm not proud of. I didn't want to deal with the support ticket and the bad rating if I abandoned a $140 order. That's how stupid the reasons are sometimes. I walked to the door and I pushed it open. Inside was one big open plan office, mostly dark, except for a single desk lamp on a table in the middle. And around that table, in the dark, were 3 men, sitting. Not eating, not working, no laptops, no papers. Just 3 men sitting around an empty table in a dark office at midnight. And all 3 of them turned to look at me when the door opened. Nobody said anything for a second. Then one of them, the one in the middle, smiled and said, "There she is. Come on in. Set it down. Shut the door behind you. Shut the door behind you." I have replayed this moment more times than I can count, and I still don't know exactly what they were, or what would have happened. Maybe nothing. Maybe they were 3 weird guys who'd ordered sushi, but every instinct I had, and I trust those instincts now in a way I didn't before. Every instinct screamed that the moment that door shut, I was not walking back out of that room. I didn't set the bags down. I said, "Oh, I actually need a signature down at the lobby. Company policy for orders over 100. Can one of you come down?" Which is completely made up. There's no such thing. But it was the only thing my brain produced. A reason for one of them to leave with me. Toward the exit. Toward people. The middle one's smile didn't change, but something behind it did. He said, "Just leave it here. We'll take care of you." And the man on the left stood up, slowly. Between me and... No, he wasn't between me and the door yet, but he was moving to be. I put the bags down on the floor right where I stood, in the doorway, and I said, "I'll be right back with the tablet," in the most normal voice I could manage. And I turned and I walked. Not ran, walked, fast, back down that dark hallway to the elevator. I jabbed the button. I heard the office door open wider behind me, heard a voice say, "Hey, hey, hold on," and the elevator wasn't coming. And I did not wait. I hit the stairwell door right next to it, and I went down those 4 flights faster I've ever moved, and I could hear, above me, the stairwell door open and footsteps start down. I hit the lobby, sprinted across it, out the glass doors into the rain and into my car. Locked it, started it, and as I pulled out I looked up, and on the 4th floor, in the window of 410, I could see 2 figures standing at the glass, looking down at me. Just standing there, watching me go. I called the police from the road. I gave them everything. The building, the suite, the order. They went out and checked, and what they found is the part that I can't make sense of. Suite 410 was leased to a company that had gone out of business months earlier. The floor was empty, no active tenants. The order had been placed online. The address typed in manually, paid with a gift card. There was no signature, no name that led anywhere. And by the time officers got into the building, Suite 410 was dark and empty. The bags of food were gone. The men were gone. The desk lamp was off, like nobody had ever been there. The officer who called me back was decent about it. He didn't make me feel crazy, but he also didn't have anything for me. He said gently that they had no idea who the men were or what they wanted, and that I should be glad I trusted my gut, and that he'd seen setups before. That was his word, setups, where a big, safe-seeming order to an empty place is the whole point. Get someone alone, somewhere with no cameras, late at night, where no one's expecting them. I think about the made-up signature line a lot, how it just came out of me. How if I'd been a little more tired, a little more eager to please, a little more worried about a bad rating, I'd have set the bags down and turned to shut the door because a customer asked me to. Politely, I stopped delivering after that night. I found other ways to handle the debt, and the thing I carry from it isn't really fear of the dark or of empty buildings. It's something quieter. It's that all three of them were so calm, so patient. They'd set up a lamp and sat down around a table in the dark and waited for whoever the app would send, the same way you'd wait for a bus, like it was just a thing they did, like it had worked before. A 3 a.m. pizza delivery sent me to the edge of a dark forest. There's a kind of dark you only find way out past the last streetlight, where the trees start and the road just gives up. City people don't know that dark. I do now. I delivered a pizza into it once, and part of me never fully came back out. My name is Eli. I was 22, living in a small town outside Coeur d'Alene, Idaho, up in the Panhandle, where the towns are little islands in a whole lot of forest. I worked nights at the only pizza place in town that delivered late, mostly because nobody else wanted the late shift. Our delivery range was huge because the area was so spread out. You could drive 25 minutes to drop off one pizza to a cabin in the woods. That was normal up there. I'd done dozens of them. This was a Friday, or technically Saturday by then, because the order came in right at closing, almost 3 in the morning. We were about to lock up. The phone rang, and my manager took it, and I watched his face do something funny while he wrote down the address. When he hung up, he said, "This one's all the way out on Forest Road 9. You don't have to take it. It's late and it's far." But it was a big order. 2 large pizzas, wings, 2 liter. And the guy had said on the phone he'd tip $40 cash because of the distance and the hour. $40 cash was most of a night's tips for me in one drop. So I said I'd take it. My manager gave me a look, but he didn't stop me. He just said, "Text me when you're heading back." Forest Road 9 is real, and it's exactly what it sounds like. You drive out of town, the houses thin out, then there's nothing. Just 2-lane road, then it turns to gravel. Then you're driving into national forest with walls of black pine on both sides, and your high beams making a little tunnel of light. It had been raining, and the gravel was soft and loud under the tires. The address was a long way down, 11 miles, and the GPS lost signal about halfway in. I had to go by the directions the guy had given over the phone, which my manager had scribbled down. Past the second cattle guard, look for the gate. Pull off by the gate and flash your lights. They'll come out. That last part. Pull off by the gate and flash your lights. They'll come out. I didn't love it, but cabins out there don't have addresses. Half of them don't have driveways you'd recognize. So people give directions like that all the time. I told myself it was normal. I kept driving. I found the second cattle guard, rattled across it, and a little past it, on the right, my headlights caught a gate. Just a metal farm gate across a track that disappeared into the trees. No house in sight, no lights, no mailbox. Just the gate, and beyond it, dark. I pulled off. I sat there with the pizzas warm on the passenger seat, and the rain ticking on the roof, and the engine running. And I did what the directions said. I flashed my high beams, 2 times, then off. Nothing happened. For maybe a minute, nothing. Just my headlights on the gate, and the gravel, and the first few feet of trees, and total black past that. Then, way back in the trees, well off to the side of the track, not on it, a light flashed back, twice. A flashlight, I figured. somebody answering, and I felt a little wave of relief, like, okay, good, there's the customer, this is fine. Except the light wasn't coming toward the gate. It was off to the side, in the trees, and it stayed there. And then it flashed again, twice, from a different spot, further to the left, like it had moved 30 feet sideways in the dark without coming any closer to the road. I told myself, 2 people, maybe, somebody with a flashlight at the cabin, and somebody else walking out. That's the kind of thing your brain does to keep you calm. But then there was a third flash, twice again, this time on the other side of my car, off in the trees to the right, and I realized that whatever was signaling me wasn't at a cabin at all. It was spread out in the trees on both sides of the road, and it was using my own headlights to see exactly where I was, while it stayed back in the dark where I couldn't see it. I want to be honest with you about the next few seconds, because they're a blur and they're the most scared I have ever been. There was no cabin. There was no customer walking up. There were lights in the trees on both sides of me, flashing in that same 2 blink pattern I'd made, answering me, getting me to keep flashing back so they could place me. And the moment I understood that, I also understood I had pulled off the road. My car was nosed slightly toward the gate, and I was not pointed at the way out. I didn't flash my lights again. I dropped it into reverse. I didn't do a careful 3-point turn. I just backed up hard onto the road, gravel spraying, and the second my front end swung toward town, I floored it. And in the half second, my headlights swept across the trees as I turned. I saw, and I will never be sure, and I've made my peace with never being sure. I saw at least one figure standing at the edge of the tree line, not walking, just standing, close to the road now, much closer than any flashlight had been, watching me turn around. I drove those 11 miles back out faster than that road should ever be driven. Fishtailing on the gravel, the pizzas sliding off the seat onto the floor. I didn't slow down until I hit pavement and saw the first street light of town, and then I pulled over and just sat there shaking with my hazards on. I called my manager. He answered. He'd waited up. And when I told him, fast and not making much sense, about the gate and the lights in the trees on both sides, he got very quiet. And then he told me something he hadn't told me when I left, because he said he hadn't wanted to spook me over. What was probably nothing. He said the guy on the phone had been off, that he'd asked weird questions before he even ordered, asked if we only sent one driver, asked how late the driver would be out, asked if the driver carried much cash. My manager had figured it was just a drunk guy at 3 a.m. and taken the order anyway. But hearing about the lights in the trees, he stopped talking for a second. And then he just said, "Don't ever take a Forest Road order again. I don't care how big the tip is." We called the county sheriff. A deputy actually drove out Forest Road 9 that morning, once it was light. And here's the part that sits in my chest to this day. There was no cabin anywhere near that gate. The gate led to an old logging track that hadn't been used in years and didn't go to any residence at all. There was no one to deliver to. There had never been anyone to deliver to. But the deputy did find something. Off the track, back in the trees, on both sides. The way I'd said, he found areas where the brush was tamped down, flat spots, and the remains of a couple of cigarettes, recent, and a spot where someone had clearly been sitting and waiting for a while, on both sides of the road. Like the lights I'd seen. He couldn't tell me who. He couldn't tell me how long they'd been doing it, or whether other drivers, on other late nights, had pulled off by that gate and flashed their lights and gotten out of the car to look for a customer who was never there. He just took my statement and told me I'd done the right thing by not getting out, and that was that. Nothing in the news. Nothing ever came of it. Just flat spots in the brush, 11 miles into the forest, and a phone order from a number that turned out to be a prepaid burner. I don't deliver anymore. I moved to a city, partly because of this, and I'll tell you the honest truth. I sleep better with streetlights and noise, and neighbors close, because what I learned out on Forest Road 9 is that the worst dark isn't empty. It's patient. It learns your signal. It flashes back, and it waits for you to get out of the car. I never did. That's the only reason I'm here telling you this. My dog wouldn't stop staring at my bedroom door. Then the handle started moving. I trust my dog more than I trust my own eyes now. People think that's funny when I say it. It's not a joke. She knew something was in the house a full hour before I did, and if I'd listened to her sooner, I'd have had more of a head start. My name is Hannah. I was 31, renting a small 2-bedroom house on the outskirts of Yakima, Washington. Older neighborhood, big yards, the kind of street where the houses sit far apart, and there's farmland starting just a few blocks over. I lived alone except for my dog, a border collie mix named Sadie. I'd adopted her 2 years earlier, and she was the most relaxed dog you'd ever meet. Nothing rattled her. Thunderstorms, fireworks, the vacuum. She'd sleep right through all of it. That detail matters. Remember it. This happened on a weeknight in March. I'd worked late, gotten home around 9, made dinner, and settled in. It was raining, steady, the kind that drums on the roof and makes the house feel sealed off from everything. Sadie was lying on the kitchen floor, where she always was. Normal night. Completely normal. Around 10:30, I noticed Sadie was acting strange. She'd gotten up off the kitchen floor, and she was standing in the hallway, facing toward the back of the house, toward the bedrooms. Just standing. Still. Ears up. I called her and she didn't come, which she always did. She just stood there staring down the dark hallway. I figured maybe a raccoon was outside, or a cat. We got both around there. I didn't think much of it, but she wouldn't stop. For the next half hour, she stayed in that hallway, and when I went to check on her, she'd moved. She was now sitting directly in front of my closed bedroom door at the end of the hall, facing it, completely focused on it, and she'd started making this sound. Not a bark. A low, continuous growl, so quiet I almost couldn't hear it over the rain. I'd never heard her growl, not once in 2 years. I stood behind her, in the hallway, and I looked at that closed bedroom door, and I felt the first cold drop of real fear, because Sadie was staring at the gap under the door, like there was something on the other side. In my bedroom, which I had walked out of an hour earlier, and which had been empty, I told myself the logical thing. The window was probably open, and the curtain was moving, or a draft, and she was reacting to that. I reached over her head and I opened the bedroom door and turned on the light. Nothing. Empty room. Bed made, curtain still, window shut and locked. I even checked, looked under the bed, opened the closet, the whole embarrassing routine. Nothing. Sadie wouldn't come into the room. She stayed in the hallway at the threshold, staring in, growling. Here's the thing I figured out later. The thing that turns my stomach. I'd been thinking about it wrong. Sadie wasn't growling at something inside my bedroom. My bedroom had a second door, a sliding glass door that opened onto a little concrete patio in the backyard. She wasn't staring at the room. She was staring at that back door, at what was on the other side of it. And by opening the bedroom door and standing there in the lit-up room, I'd just shown whatever it was exactly where I was, through the glass, in the dark. I didn't know that yet, though. I shut the bedroom door, figuring I'd sleep in the guest room since Sadie clearly didn't want to be in there, and I'd deal with her weirdness in the morning. I went to the guest room, which was the other bedroom, across the hall. Sadie followed me and lay down in the doorway, facing out toward my bedroom door across the hall, still watching it, still low growling. I left the guest room door open and I lay down, and I'll be honest, I was scared enough that I didn't turn the light all the way off. I lay there listening to the rain and to Sadie's low growl, and I started to drift, the way you do, exhaustion winning over nerves. What woke me up was Sadie going silent. The growl just stopped, and the silence was worse than the growl had been. I opened my eyes. She was up on her feet now, in the doorway, rigid, and she was staring across the hall at my closed bedroom door. And I followed her eyes to the door, and in the light from the guest room lamp, I could see the doorknob. It was turning, slowly. The handle of my bedroom door was rotating, smooth and careful, the way you'd turn a knob when you're trying to do it silently. It turned until it stopped, the latch clearing, and then the door, my bedroom door, eased open an inch into the dark room beyond. Someone had come in through the sliding glass door in my bedroom. They'd been on the patio the whole time Sadie was growling. They'd gotten the slider open while I slept. And now they were inside my bedroom, and they were opening the door to the hall to come find the rest of the house, to come find me. I did not scream. I don't know why. I think I was too scared for sound to come out. What I did was move. The guest room had its own door, and I'd left it open. And Sadie and I were both up at the same instant, and I grabbed her collar and we went the other way, toward the front of the house, toward the front door. I didn't try to be quiet anymore. The second I moved, the thing behind me did too. I heard the bedroom door bang fully open and fast footsteps come out into the hall behind us, heavy, a grown person moving fast. I had my keys in a bowl by the front door. I'd thank my own stupid habit for that 100 times since, and I grabbed them and the door, and Sadie and I went out into the rain and across the wet grass to my car in the driveway. I got us in, locked it, and laid on the horn, just held it down. This long blast in the dead quiet rainy street at near 1 in the morning. A porch light came on across the street, then another, and in my own front doorway, lit up from behind by my hallway light, a figure stood for just a second. A man. I could see that much, just his silhouette, and then he turned and went back into the house, toward the back, toward the patio he'd come in through. By the time the police arrived 8 minutes later, the sliding glass door in my bedroom stood wide open to the rain, and he was gone across the back field. The police were thorough. The slider had been jimmied. There were pry marks on the frame. And here's what got me. The officer asked if I'd noticed anything off in the days before. And I remembered then that 2 nights earlier, Sadie had done a smaller version of this. Gotten up, stared at the back of the house for a few minutes, then settled. I'd thought nothing of it. The officer's face changed a little, and he said sometimes these guys watch a place first. A night or two, learn the routine. When the lights go off, where the dog sleeps, whether there's a man in the house. And then they come back. They never caught him. No prints they could use, nothing taken. Because he never got the chance to take anything. Just pry marks on a door, and tamped grass on the patio, and the memory of a doorknob turning slow in lamplight. What I think about isn't really the man. It's Sadie. 2 years, nothing to her, and that night she knew. She knew at 10:30, when he was probably still out at the edge of the yard deciding. She tried to tell me for 2.5 hours. The only way she could, and I kept explaining it away, because the logical part of my brain couldn't accept what the animal part of hers already had. I moved out within the month. New place, better locks, a security system, the whole thing. But the real security system sleeps at the foot of my bed every night. And now, when Sadie lifts her head and stares at a door, any door, I don't tell myself it's a raccoon. I get up, I get my keys, and I trust her every single time, because she earned that the night the handle started to turn. I rented an Airbnb alone. Then I saw a man watching me through the window I used to love staying in places out in the middle of nowhere. The quiet, the trees, no neighbors. I'd book the most remote cabin I could find and call it a recharge. I don't do that anymore. Now I want a hallway, a front desk, 100 strangers between me and the dark. Let me tell you why. My name is Priya. I was 30, working a stressful corporate job in Portland, and I'd hit the kind of burnout where you just need to disappear for a few days. So I booked a little A-frame cabin about 2 hours out, up in the forest near the Oregon Coast Range. The listing was gorgeous. Wood interior, huge triangle window in the front, looking out at the trees, wood stove, totally secluded. Your private escape, the listing said. No neighbors for miles. That was exactly what I wanted. I drove out on a Friday afternoon, alone, with groceries and a stack of books, and every intention of not speaking to another human for 3 days. The cabin was even better than the photos. That big front window was the whole point of the place. It took up most of the front wall, floor to ceiling, looking out at a clearing and the forest beyond. In the daytime, it was beautiful. You felt like you were sitting inside the woods. The first thing I noticed, though, and I pushed it down because I didn't want anything to ruin my weekend, was that a window that big, with no neighbors and no curtains, is only private during the day. At night, with the lights on inside, that window turns into a black mirror. You can't see out, but anyone outside can see in perfectly, like a lit stage. I noticed it the first evening, when it got dark, and I caught my own reflection in the glass and realized I couldn't see a single thing past it. I told myself it didn't matter. No neighbors for miles, right? Who's going to be out there? The first night was fine. I read, I had wine, I slept great. Saturday was lovely. I went for a walk, came back, made dinner. And Saturday night is when it started. I was sitting on the couch facing the big window, reading, around 10. The lamp was on next to me, and I got that feeling. You know the one we're taught to ignore as silly. The feeling of being watched. I looked up at the window and saw only my own reflection and the dark. I told myself it was nothing and went back to my book. But the feeling wouldn't leave. And after a few minutes I looked up again, and this time, out past my reflection, far back at the edge of the clearing where the trees started, there was a light. Small, pale, just hanging there in the black. My first thought was relief, honestly. Another cabin, a porch light, neighbors after all. But the listing had said no neighbors for miles, and the light wasn't shaped like a window or a porch. It was small and round and low to the ground. And as I watched it, it went out, and then a few seconds later it came on again, slightly to the left. Closer. It was a flashlight. Someone was at the edge of the clearing with a flashlight, and they were moving toward the cabin. I did the thing you do. I jumped up and turned off the lamp, so I wasn't lit up in the window like a fish in a tank. And the second the light inside went off, I could finally see out, and the flashlight outside went off too, immediately. The same instant, like whoever was holding it had seen my light dot go out and didn't want to be caught moving in the sudden dark. We were both standing in the dark then, me inside, them outside, and I stood there at the side of that huge black window, heart slamming, not daring to move, staring out at a clearing I could just barely make out in the cloud-filtered moonlight. And after maybe a minute, my eyes adjusted enough that I saw him. He was standing at the tree line, a man, just standing, facing the cabin, not moving, not coming closer now that he couldn't tell exactly where I was inside, but not leaving either, just standing there in the rain that had started to fall, watching the dark cabin, waiting for the light to come back on so he could find me again. I want to tell you what's so awful about that, because it's specific. As long as my lights were off, I was safe-ish, hidden. But I was also blind to everything except that one window. And I couldn't see the back of the cabin, the bedroom, the door. And as long as my lights were on, I could see the rest of the house. But I became a lit target in that giant window. There was no version where I could both see and not be seen. The cabin had been built to be looked into. I got to my phone by feel, screen brightness all the way down, and there was no signal. Of course there was no signal. Disconnect from it all, the listing had said. There was a landline type thing, one of those Wi-Fi calling setups the host mentioned, but the Wi-Fi router's little lights were the brightest thing in the room. And I didn't want to go near that glowing box in front of the window. I texted 911 anyway, hoping it'd send when it found slivers of signal, and I moved, low, away from the window, into the bathroom, the only room with no exterior window, and I locked the door and sat on the floor. I sat in that bathroom for what felt like hours. At one point I heard it, slow footsteps on the wooden deck that wrapped around the front of the cabin. The boards creaking, one at a time, taking their time. The handle of the front door moving, testing. I'd locked it, thank God, I'm obsessive about locking doors. A long pause. Then the footsteps again, moving around the side of the cabin, testing the bedroom window, slow, patient. Whoever it was wasn't panicking, wasn't rushing. He was just methodically checking every way in the dark, while I sat on a bathroom floor with my hand over my own mouth. And then, headlights. Another car came up the long dirt drive to the cabin. I found out later, it was nothing to do with me. It was a couple who'd booked the same cabin and gotten their dates mixed up with the host, showing up Saturday night by mistake, totally confused and a little annoyed. But their headlights swept across that clearing as they pulled in, And in the bathroom, I heard the footsteps on the deck stop, then move fast. Not toward the new car, away from it, off the deck and into the trees. By the time I came out, shaking, and the confused couple knocked on the door, he was gone. The host felt terrible. The double booking was a glitch on their end, and they were horrified by the rest of it. The couple let me follow their car all the way back to the highway that night. I wasn't staying another second. I made a police report. A deputy went out the next day. Here's what stays with me. The deputy found footprints in the soft ground all around the cabin, at the tree line, where the man had stood, on the deck, under the bedroom window. And he found, at the edge of the clearing, a spot where the grass and brush were pressed flat, with a few cigarette butts. Like someone had sat there, in view of that big front window, for a long while. Not just that night. The butts weren't all fresh. Some were older. The deputy was careful with how he put it, but what he was telling me was that someone had used that spot before. That a cabin advertised as remote, with a giant uncovered window facing the woods, that lights up like a display case every night. That's not just a beautiful escape. To the right kind of person, it's a way to watch whoever's staying there, alone, with no neighbors for miles, and all the time in the world to decide. They never identified him. Just footprints and old cigarettes and a flat patch of grass with a perfect view of the window. I think about the listing photos all the time. How that huge window was the selling point. How I scrolled past dozens of cabins and picked that one because of the window. Because it was so isolated. I chose it for the exact features that made me pray. And the worst part is, I'm sure that listing is still up, still beautiful in the photos, still being booked by people who want to get away from everything. Not realizing that out there, with no neighbors for miles, everything includes the only people who can hear you. Now I stay in hotels, floor 3 or higher, lots of neighbors, and I will never, ever sit in a lit room in front of a dark window again, without knowing exactly what's behind it. DoorDash sent me to an abandoned farmhouse in the middle of nowhere. The thing about driving for an app is you go wherever the phone tells you. You don't get to ask why. You just follow the blue line. I followed it once to a place I should never have driven to, and the only reason I'm telling you this, instead of being a missing persons flyer, is a flat tire. I didn't even know was a gift at the time. My name is Marcus. I was 33, living outside Pendleton, Oregon, wheat country, way out east, where the land just rolls out flat and gold for miles, and the towns are tiny and far apart. I drove for the delivery apps to supplement my income, mostly evenings. Out there, the orders could send you a long way, because the population's so spread out. A 15-mile drive to drop off a single bag wasn't unusual. You learned to take the big payout long-distance ones, because the per mile made them worth it. This was a Thursday in late October, already dark by 6 cold, a thin rain coming and going. Around 9, an order came in that made me sit up. The payout was huge, almost $30, with a big pre-attached tip for a single delivery. The catch was the distance. The drop-off was 17 miles out of town, down a county road, and then a private gravel road, way out in the wheat. The pickup was a burger place in town. $30 for one run is a lot out there. I took it without thinking twice. I got the food, started driving. The county road was empty, just my headlights and the rain, and the black wheat fields on both sides. The GPS took me off the county road onto a long gravel drive, and that's when I started to feel the first edge of something wrong, because there were no lights ahead, anywhere. Out there, you can see a lit-up house from miles away across the flat. I should have been able to see my destination from a long way off. There was nothing, just dark. The blue line ended at a farmhouse, and in my headlights, I could see right away that the place was abandoned. Not lights off abandoned, long gone abandoned. The windows were dark holes, some boarded, some just empty. Part of the porch roof had collapsed. There was an old barn off to the side, leaning. Weeds grown up through what had been a yard. Nobody had lived there in years. No vehicle, no porch light, no sign anyone had been there in a decade. I stopped the car in the gravel turnaround in front of the house, food on the seat next to me, and just sat there confused. My first thought wasn't fear. It was the annoyed, practical thought every driver has. Great, a fake address. I drove 17 miles for nothing. Now I've got to deal with reporting it, and hope I still get paid. I picked up my phone to take the photo we take for delivery issues, to document the address. And while I was sitting there with the dome light on, looking at my phone, I saw headlights turn off the county road, way back onto the gravel drive behind me. A vehicle coming up the same long drive I'd just come up. The only way in, the only way out. For a second, I was relieved. Maybe it was the customer, maybe somebody who lived nearby. But the practical part of my brain was already doing the math, and the math was bad. There was no one to deliver to here. This house had been empty for years. So who places a $30 order to a dead address? And who comes driving up a private gravel road to an abandoned farmhouse at 9 at night? Right behind the driver, the order pulled in. I turned off my dome light. The headlights kept coming, slow, no hurry. And then they stopped. About 2/3 of the way up the drive, not pulling up to the house, stopping in the middle of the only road out, and the headlights went off. Just sat there, dark, blocking the drive. I'm not a brave guy, and I don't carry anything, and I had exactly one thought, clear as a bell. I am not driving back down that road, because the only road is blocked, and whoever that is, they didn't drive up here to eat a burger. Out there in the wheat, I knew something the customer maybe didn't count on. I knew the land a little. I knew that the gravel drive was the only maintained way in. But I also knew these old farms always had a second track, a field road, where equipment came and went. And in my headlights, when I'd pulled in, I'd half noticed a gap in the fence to the side of the barn, 2 ruts running off into the wheat, a tractor track. I didn't turn my headlights back on. I put the car in gear and rolled, slow, lights off, just idle speed in the dark, across the gravel toward the barn and that gap in the fence. The other vehicle, blocking the road, must have seen my brake lights or heard the gravel, because its headlights snapped back on and it lurched forward, fast now, up the drive toward the house. But I was already onto the field track, into the wheat, bumping along those 2 ruts with no lights, the burger bag flying off the seat, the stalks scraping both sides of the car. The field track ran along the edge of the property, and I got lucky, so lucky. It came out onto a different county road about a half mile on, through another broken gate. I crashed through it, swung onto the pavement, turned my lights on, and drove. Behind me, way back across the field, I could see the headlights at the farmhouse turning, searching, but they were stuck back at the house, on the wrong side. And by the time they could have figured out the field track, I was gone, doing 70 on a county road toward town. I made it about 8 miles before my front tire, which I'd shredded on something in that field, finally went flat, and I had to limp into a gas station. And sitting there in the fluorescent light, hands shaking, waiting for the police, I realized the flat tire had probably saved my life in a way, because it meant I'd driven hard and fast and far on a dying tire instead of stopping, somewhere dark to catch my breath where they might have caught up. The sheriff's office took it seriously, more seriously than I expected. The deputy who came got quiet when I described it, and he told me they'd had reports that an abandoned property used as a fake delivery address, way out where there's no cameras and no neighbors, and only one road in, was something they'd seen before in those empty stretches. The order had been placed on an account, made that day, paid with a gift card, the customer phone a burner. All the hallmarks. They drove out. The other vehicle was gone, of course. But in the gravel turnaround, in front of that farmhouse, in the soft mud, there were tire tracks from more than one vehicle, recent and boot prints, and back behind the barn, out of sight of the drive. A more recent set of tracks where a vehicle had been parked and waiting before I ever arrived. There'd been a second one, already there. Parked behind the barn in the dark the whole time I sat confused in the turnaround. The headlights coming up the drive were just the one closing the door behind me. They never caught anyone. Just tracks in the mud, a burner phone, a gift card, and an abandoned farmhouse 17 miles from town. That, to the right kind of person, wasn't abandoned at all. It was perfect. No witnesses, no cameras, one road in, and a delivery app that would happily send a stranger straight to it for $30. No questions asked. I don't drive for the apps anymore. And now, anywhere the blue line takes me, the first thing I do when I pull up is check that I'm not boxed in, that there's always a second way out. Because I learned that the trap isn't the destination. The trap is the road behind you, and the person who waits to close it. A friendly trucker asked me to look inside his cargo area. I shouldn't have followed him. The friendliest people are the ones I watch the closest now. That sounds backwards, I know. But I learned that the hard way, at a truck stop at 2 a.m, from a man who smiled the whole time. My name is Jenna. I was 24, and back then I was doing something a lot of people think is reckless. And honestly, it kind of was. I was driving across the country alone, moving from Ohio to Oregon for a job, all my stuff packed into a little hatchback. I'd budgeted tight, which meant I was doing the drive in long stretches and sleeping in rest areas, and truck stops to save on motels. 3 days of interstate. I was on the second night, somewhere in the empty middle of the country, that long dark stretch of highway where the exits are 40 miles apart, and each one is just a gas station and a whole lot of nothing. I pulled into a big truck stop a little before 2 a.m. to use the bathroom, get coffee, and gas up. It was one of those huge ones, a travel center, fuel pumps for cars on one side, a big lot for Semsies on the other, the store in the middle. At 2 a.m. it was mostly empty. A few trucks parked for the night in the big lot, their running lights on, drivers asleep. A couple of cars at the pumps, the bored clerk inside. That was it. I gassed up, went in, used the restroom, got my coffee. And as I was walking back across the lot to my car, a man called out to me, friendly. Hey, excuse me, miss? He was a trucker, or dressed like one. Jeans, flannel, a cap, maybe 50, with a big, easy smile. He was standing by the trailer of a parked semi a couple spots down from my car, and he seemed completely harmless. That's important. He wasn't lurking, wasn't in the shadows. He was right there under the lot lights with this warm, apologetic grin, the kind of guy who looks like somebody's uncle. He said he was so sorry to bother me, but he was in a bind. He said he'd been loading up, and he thought maybe his cargo had shifted, or a strap had come loose, and his back was bad, and he just needed an extra set of eyes. Could I just take a quick look in the back of the trailer and tell him if I saw a strap hanging loose on the left side? 30 seconds. He'd really appreciate it. He even pulled out his phone like he was going to give me a few bucks for the trouble. And here's the thing. Every single part of it was reasonable. People help each other at truck stops. He was older. He had a bad back. It was a 30-second favor. We were standing in a lit parking lot. My instinct to be polite, to be helpful, to not be the rude girl who ignores a nice older man asking for a small favor. All of that kicked in hard. I actually started to walk toward the back of the trailer with him. I took a few steps. What stopped me, and I've thought so much about how small it was the way he positioned himself. As I started toward the back of the trailer, he moved to the rear doors and opened one, and it was black inside. And he sort of stepped to the side and made a little after you gesture, gesturing for me to step up and lean in first, into the dark, while he stood outside it, and something just went cold and quiet in me. Because if your cargo strap is loose and you want a second opinion, you look in together, or you look in and point and the other person confirms. You don't usher a stranger to climb up and lean into a dark trailer ahead of you. There was no reason for me to be the one going in first. Into the dark, with him behind me, between me and the open lot. I stopped. I didn't make a scene. I just stopped a few feet short and said, real casual, "Oh, you know what? I actually can't. My eyes are terrible at night. I won't be any help. But the clerk inside is right there. He could come look or call it in." And I started backing toward the store, toward the lights, keeping my eyes on him. His smile didn't drop exactly, but it changed. It went flat. The warmth just drained out of his face while the smile stayed in place. And he looked at me for a second. Not pleading anymore, not friendly, just evaluating. And then he said, quietly, "Yeah, don't worry about it." And he closed the trailer door. I walked fast to my car, got in, locked it, and, instead of pulling out right away, I drove the short distance over to right in front of the store, parked under the brightest light, in full view of the clerk inside. And I sat there with the doors locked and my heart going. And I watched him. He didn't go to the cab of that semi and go to sleep like a driver who was done for the night. He stood by the trailer for a minute, looking around the lot. And then, this is the part that made it real. Another car at the pumps, a young woman, alone, finished fueling, and he started walking toward her with that same easy, apologetic walk, the bad back amble. Getting ready to ask his 30-second favor again, I laid on my horn. Long. The woman looked over. The clerk looked up through the window. The trucker stopped in his tracks. I rolled my window down 2 inches and yelled to her to come over, that I needed help with directions. Anything, just to break the moment and pull her toward the light and away from him. She came over, confused, and I just quietly told her what had happened, what he'd asked me, the trailer. Her face went white. She'd been about 30 seconds from him reaching her. The clerk called it in. The trucker, the second he saw the clerk on the phone, didn't run. He calmly got into the cab of the semi and pulled out of the lot. No rush, like nothing had happened, and merged onto the interstate and was gone. The woman and I gave what we could to the deputy who showed up, but it wasn't much. Neither of us had gotten a great look at the plate or the trailer markings in the dark. There were 100 white semis on that interstate that night. Here's what the deputy said that I've never forgotten. He said the dangerous ones aren't the ones who look dangerous. The ones who look dangerous, women avoid on instinct, and they know it. The ones who do real harm, he said, learn to look safe. They learn the exact script, the bad back, the small favor, the apologetic smile, the few bucks offered, because politeness is the lock and the script is the key. He said he didn't need to grab you. He needed you to walk over there on your own. And you almost did, because everything he said gave you a polite reason to. That's the part that stays with me. I almost did. Not because I was forced, but because I was raised to be nice, to be helpful, to not embarrass a kindly older man over a silly feeling. The feeling was the only thing that was actually telling me the truth, and I came within a few steps of overriding it to be polite. They never caught him. I have no idea how many times that script worked before me, or after. I finished my drive to Oregon the next 2 days in daylight only, parked at busy stops, never alone in a dark lot again. And the lesson I carry isn't don't trust truckers or don't drive alone. It's smaller and bigger than that. It's that no reason for me to go first, into the dark, with him behind me, is a complete sentence. You don't owe anyone the favor. You don't owe anyone the politeness. The cold, quiet feeling that stops you a few steps short. That's not rudeness. That's the part of you that's actually paying attention. I drove for Uber Eats for a little over a year. And during that time, I learned that most bad deliveries announce themselves before you even get there. The payout looks too good. The address looks strange. The customer refuses to answer. The instructions say something like, "Come around back," or "Door is open." This one didn't do any of that. That's why it still bothers me. My name is Trevor. I was 27 when this happened, living just outside Bozeman, Montana. I had a normal day job at an equipment rental place, but I delivered food at night to cover bills. Montana is a strange place to do delivery work. In town, it's like anywhere else. Apartment complexes, college houses, fast food orders, people too tired or too lazy to go pick up dinner. But 10 or 15 minutes outside town, everything changes. The neighborhoods disappear. The roads get narrow. Then the pavement turns to gravel. Then the gravel turns into something that barely feels like a road at all. I had delivered to rural homes before, ranch houses, cabins, trailers, places where the nearest neighbor was a mile away. So when this order came in, nothing about it felt especially strange at first. It was early November. The first real cold snap of the season had moved in, and freezing rain had been coming down on and off all evening. Not heavy, but enough to make everything shine under headlights. It was a little after 10 when I got the order. A sandwich shop on the south side of town. 1 bag, 1 drink, normal payout, normal tip. The drop-off address was south of Bozeman, out toward the foothills. It wasn't close, but it wasn't crazy either. The app showed the location clearly. No weird instructions. No call when close. No come inside. Just leave at door. I accepted it without thinking much. The sandwich shop was almost empty when I got there. The kid behind the counter handed me the bag and said, "You're Trevor?" I said yeah. He looked at the receipt, then at me. Long drive for 1 sandwich. I laughed and said, "Story of my life." He smiled like it was nothing, and at the time it was nothing. I took the bag, put it on the passenger seat, and started driving. For the first 15 minutes, everything was fine. I left town, passed a few scattered houses, then the GPS told me to turn onto a county road. After that, it took me farther out than I expected. The road narrowed. The lights disappeared. The rain started hitting harder. Still, none of that was unusual for Montana. Then the GPS told me to turn left onto a gravel road. There was no streetlight at the turn, just a faded road sign and a cattle fence running into the darkness. I slowed down, checked the map, and turned. The gravel road ran straight for maybe half a mile, then began to curve through a patch of trees. My headlights caught trunks, wet branches, and the shine of muddy ruts ahead of me. The GPS said I had 2 miles to go, then 1 mile, then half a mile. I was looking for the usual signs of a house, a porch light, a mailbox, a driveway, a dog barking somewhere. There was nothing. Just the road, the rain, and the trees pressing closer on both sides. Then the GPS said, "You have arrived." I stopped. There was no house, no cabin, no mailbox, no driveway, nothing. The pin on the map was sitting directly on the gravel road, in the middle of the trees. I sat there for a few seconds, annoyed more than scared. Bad pins happen all the time. Customers drop the marker in the wrong spot, or the app gets confused in rural areas. I picked up my phone and called the customer. It rang twice, then went to voicemail. I called again, same thing. Then I texted, "Hi, this is your Uber Eats driver. I'm at the pin but don't see a house. Can you send directions?" No answer. I looked around again. The road continued ahead, curving slightly to the right, about 100 yards up. Beyond the bend, I couldn't see anything. I was about to mark the order as undeliverable when I noticed something faint through the trees ahead. A warm orange light, not headlights, not a porch light, more like a campfire. It was coming from somewhere around that bend, low to the ground, flickering. At first, I felt relieved. Maybe the house was just farther up. Maybe the GPS marker was off. Maybe whoever ordered was sitting outside by a fire and didn't hear their phone. That was the normal explanation. And because I wanted the normal explanation to be true, I started rolling forward, slowly. The road got worse as I moved, deeper ruts, softer mud, branches brushing the sides of my car. Then I saw tire tracks, fresh ones, several sets. The rain had softened the gravel and the tracks were clear. They led around the bend toward the orange glow. That should have made me feel better. It didn't, because all the tracks seemed to be going in. I didn't see any coming back. I told myself I was being stupid. Tracks overlap. Mud is hard to read at night. I was tired. It was raining. I didn't know what I was looking at, so I kept going. As I got closer to the bend, I rolled my window down just a crack. That's when I heard voices. Low voices. At least 2 people. Maybe 3. I couldn't make out words. Just the rhythm of people talking quietly near a fire. And under that, very faintly, I heard music. Old music. Tinny and distant, like it was coming from a small speaker or an old radio. That was the moment the whole thing stopped feeling like a wrong address and started feeling like something else. I slowed almost to a stop. The orange light was brighter now, just beyond the bend. I still couldn't see a house. No roofline, no porch, no windows, no vehicle lights. Only that firelight. I picked up my phone again and called the customer one more time. Straight to voicemail. I texted again. I'm close, but don't see a house. Please come out or send directions. Nothing. I sat there with my foot on the brake, watching rain slide down the windshield. I don't know how long I sat there. Maybe 10 seconds. Maybe 30. Then my headlights caught something on the right side of the road. A pickup truck. It was parked partly behind the trees, nose angled away from the road, almost like someone had tried to hide it but hadn't pulled in far enough. No lights, no movement, no visible plate from where I was. Just a dark truck sitting there, engine off, right before the bend. I stared at it, and all at once, the pieces started lining up in a way I didn't like, an order to a pin with no house, a customer who wouldn't answer, a fire around the bend, voices, a hidden truck, fresh tracks leading in. I put my car in reverse. The second my reverse lights came on, the voices stopped, completely, not faded, stopped. The music kept playing for maybe another second. Then that stopped too. Now it was just rain. That silence did more to scare me than anything else. I kept my foot light on the gas and started backing up. The road was too narrow to turn around where I was, so I had to reverse carefully, watching the mirrors, trying not to slide into the ditch. Then, near the firelight, someone stood up. I saw the silhouette through the trees, then another, then a third. 3 figures standing near the orange glow, facing the road, facing me. They didn't call out, they didn't wave, they didn't ask if I was the delivery driver. They just stood there, watching my car back away. I backed faster. My rear tires slipped in the mud, and for one horrible second, I thought I was stuck. I pressed the gas too hard. The tires spun, gravel kicked up, and the car fishtailed sideways. That was when one of the figures started moving, not running, walking, straight toward the road. That gave me the panic I needed. I straightened the wheel, hit the gas again, and the tires caught. The car jerked backward hard enough that the drink in the cup holder tipped over and spilled across the console. I didn't care. I backed down that road faster than I should have. One hand on the wheel, one hand braced against the passenger seat, looking over my shoulder through a fogged back window. The figure kept coming until I lost sight of him around the bend. Then my headlights, still facing forward, caught something else. For just a second in the mirror, I saw headlights turn on behind me. Not from the pickup near the bend, from farther back. Somewhere behind the trees on the other side of the road. Another vehicle. That meant there had been more than one. I stopped trying to reverse carefully. I just got out. I backed all the way to a wider spot near the fence line, where the road had opened slightly, cranked the wheel, threw the car into drive, then reverse, then drive again, doing the ugliest 3-point turn of my life. My front bumper clipped a wooden post. The whole car jolted. I thought I'd destroyed something, but the car still moved, so I floored it. The gravel road became a blur. Branches hit the sides, mud sprayed up. The bag of food fell off the seat. In my rearview mirror, headlights appeared behind me, far back, but there. They were following. I don't know if they were coming from the truck by the bend or the other vehicle I saw. I didn't wait to find out. I drove as fast as I could without losing control. My little car was not made for that road. It slid through turns, bottomed out twice, and at one point, I hit a pothole so hard I thought the wheel had come off. The headlights behind me stayed visible, not gaining fast, but not disappearing either. I finally reached the straight section near the cattle fence. The gravel widened there, and I pushed the car harder. Then I saw pavement ahead, the county road. I hit it too fast, swerved across half the lane, corrected and kept going. Only after I was on pavement did I look back. The headlights stopped at the end of the gravel road. They didn't turn out after me. They just sat there for a moment, facing the road. Then they shut off. That somehow made it worse. I drove straight to the nearest gas station, which was nearly 15 minutes away. I parked under the brightest light, locked the doors, and finally let myself breathe. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely unlock my phone. I tried calling the customer again. Disconnected. Not voicemail this time. Disconnected. I opened the app and reported the delivery as unsafe. Then I called the sheriff's office. I expected them to brush me off. They didn't. The dispatcher asked me to stay where I was. And about 20 minutes later, a deputy pulled into the gas station. He was older, calm, not the kind of person who overreacted. I told him everything: the order, the gravel road, the light, the voices, the truck, the figures, the headlights behind me. He listened without interrupting. Then he asked me for the exact road. When I told him, his face changed slightly, not shocked, more like something had clicked. He asked, "Was it near the old turnout past the second fence line?" I said I didn't know, but that sounded right. He nodded slowly and said, "You're not the first person to mention that area." That was when my stomach dropped. He didn't give me many details at first. He just told me they'd had a couple reports over the past year involving strange activity out there. One was from a delivery driver. Another was from a woman whose car broke down nearby and who saw people standing in the trees while she waited for help. Nothing had ever been proven. Nobody had been hurt as far as they knew, but he didn't say it like he was dismissing it. He said it like he didn't like it either. The deputy took my statement and told me not to go back there. I didn't need to be told twice, but 2 days later, he called me. He said they had gone out to the location in daylight. There was no house at the pin, no cabin, no mailbox, no address. The road ended around that bend in an old logging turnaround that hadn't been used in years. But they found signs people had been there recently. A fire ring with fresh ash, cigarette butts, beer cans, food wrappers, several sets of boot prints, and tire tracks from at least 2 vehicles. One set matched where I'd seen the pickup parked near the bend. The other set was back behind the trees, hidden from the road. That vehicle had been there before I arrived, waiting. The deputy also said they found something else. On one tree near the turnout, someone had tied a strip of reflective tape low on the trunk, small enough that you wouldn't notice it in daylight unless you were looking, but at night, headlights would catch it. A marker, something to show exactly where to turn, or exactly where to stop. That detail has never left me, because it meant this wasn't random. It wasn't a group of people hanging out who happened to scare me. Someone had picked that spot, marked it, used a fake delivery order to send me there, and waited. The app support wasn't much help. The account had been created that night. The name was fake. The payment was made with a prepaid card. The phone number was no longer active next morning. The restaurant confirmed the order was real. They had made it and handed it to me. So it wasn't a glitch. It wasn't GPS drift. Someone paid money to get a stranger to drive to the end of that road. I still think about the moment. I almost kept driving around the bend. If I had gone another 100 feet, I would have been past the hidden truck, deeper into the turnout, with nowhere to turn around quickly. If they had blocked the road behind me, I would have been trapped. No houses, no cameras, no witnesses, just trees, rain, and people who already knew I was coming. That's the part that scares me most. They weren't surprised to see me. They were ready. I quit delivery driving not long after that. People always ask why, and I usually just say I got tired of the hours. That's easier than explaining the real reason. The real reason is that I learned the app doesn't know what's waiting at the pin. It doesn't know if there's a house there. It doesn't know if the person who placed the order is hungry. It just sends you. And if the blue line ends in the wrong place, you are still alone when you get there. I don't know who those people were. I don't know what they wanted. I only know they weren't waiting for a sandwich. And now, whenever a GPS tells me, "You have arrived," and I don't see lights, or a house, or any sign that a person actually lives there, I don't keep driving to check. I turn around, because some roads don't lead to homes. Some roads are only there to get you far enough away from everything else. I used to think the scariest thing about living alone was the possibility of someone breaking into your apartment. A stranger forcing a window, a door being kicked in, someone coming from outside. That was the fear I understood. What I didn't understand was that someone might already be inside. My name is Allison. I was 25 when this happened, renting the bottom floor of an old converted house in Spokane Valley, Washington. The house was built sometime in the 1920s. It had that old, tired look a lot of houses in that area have. Narrow windows, thick walls, uneven floors, and a front porch that creaked no matter where you stepped. At some point, long before I moved in, a landlord had split it into separate apartments. I had the entire ground floor. There was an upstairs unit with its own entrance on the side of the house. But when I moved in, that apartment was empty. The landlord told me it had been vacant for months, and that he was waiting to renovate it before renting it again. There was also a basement, at least technically. The basement door was inside my unit, in a short hallway near my bedroom, but the landlord told me it was sealed and not part of my rental. The door itself looked like it hadn't been opened in years. It was painted the same dull cream color as the wall, and there were so many layers of paint over the edges that it almost looked fake, like just a door-shaped outline in the hallway. When I first moved in, I tried the knob once. It didn't move. I pushed on it. Nothing. So I accepted what the landlord said. The basement was inaccessible. After a while, I stopped thinking about it. For the first couple of months, the apartment was fine. Not perfect. Old houses never are. The heat made strange knocking sounds in the walls. The floors creaked even when I was standing still. Sometimes at night, I heard a dull pop from the ceiling, like the building was shifting in its sleep. But that was normal old house stuff. I told myself that so many times that eventually I believed it. My bedroom was at the back of the apartment. It had one window facing the side yard, and a wall behind my bed that connected to some interior part of the house. I assumed it backed up against a storage space or some unused cavity near the old staircase. Near the bottom of that wall, almost hidden by the side of my bed, was an old metal vent. It was one of those rectangular grates with thin horizontal slats, painted over so many times that the edges were soft and thick. I never used it. I don't even know if air came through it. It was just there. For weeks, I barely noticed it. Then one night, I woke up around 3 a.m. Not from a sound, not from a dream, just awake. My room was dark, except for a little light coming through the blinds from a street lamp outside. I had that feeling, the one everyone knows and nobody likes admitting they know. That crawling sensation that someone is watching you. I lay still for a few seconds, listening. Nothing. No footsteps, no voices, no movement. Just the faint hum of the refrigerator from the kitchen and the occasional creak from the house. I slowly turned my head and looked around the room. My closet door was shut. My bedroom door was shut. The window was locked. Everything was normal. Then my eyes landed on the vent. For a second, I thought I saw movement behind it. Not anything clear. Just a shift in the darkness. Like something behind the grate had moved back. I stared at it for a long time. Nothing happened. Eventually, I told myself it was a shadow from outside, or my eyes adjusting in the dark. I rolled over and went back to sleep. A few nights later, it happened again. Same thing. I woke up in the middle of the night with that watched feeling. This time, I didn't move right away. I just opened my eyes and looked toward the vent. There was a faint dimness behind it. Not light exactly. More like the darkness behind the grate wasn't as dark as it should have been. I sat up. The room was silent. The dimness stayed there. Then part of it disappeared for half a second, like something had passed in front of a weak light behind the wall. I whispered, "Hello." The second I said it, I felt stupid. Nobody answered. Nothing moved. I turned on my bedside lamp and looked at the vent from across the room. Now it looked completely normal. Cream-colored metal, dust, old paint, nothing else. I almost laughed from embarrassment. I was a grown woman sitting in bed, whispering at a vent. So I turned off the lamp and tried to sleep. But after that, I couldn't stop noticing it. During the day, it was just an ugly old vent. At night, it became the one thing in the room my eyes kept finding. Sometimes, I would be brushing my teeth in the bathroom and think I heard a small scrape from inside the bedroom wall. Sometimes I would walk into the room and feel like I had interrupted something. Once, I came home from work and found my bedroom door open wider than I remembered leaving it. That sounds like nothing. Maybe it was nothing, but when you live alone, you know how you leave things. You know which doors you shut. You know where you put your keys. You know the little map of your own space. And slowly, that map started feeling unreliable. I started sleeping with the lamp on. Not every night. Just the nights when the apartment felt wrong. I told myself I was being ridiculous. I even thought about calling the landlord, but I didn't know what to say. Can you check behind my bedroom wall because I feel weird at night? That sounded insane. So I said nothing. The night everything happened was a Friday. I had gone out to dinner with 2 friends after work. Nothing special, just a small place near downtown Spokane. I remember staying later than planned because I didn't really want to go home. I hadn't admitted that to myself yet, but looking back, I think part of me already hated being in that apartment after dark. I got home a little after 11:30. It was raining. Cold rain, steady, tapping against the windows. The house looked normal from outside. Dark upstairs, dark basement windows. My own porch light on, exactly how I had left it. I unlocked my door, stepped inside, locked it behind me, and stood there listening. That had become a habit. I would come home, lock the door, and wait for a few seconds. Most of the time, I heard nothing. That night, I heard the house creak. Just once. From somewhere behind the walls, I froze. Then I reminded myself it was an old house in the rain. Old houses make noise. I changed into sweatpants, made tea, and got ready for bed. I wasn't tired yet, so I sat up in bed with the lamp on, scrolling through my phone. My room was fully lit. That's important. I wasn't half asleep. I wasn't dreaming. I wasn't in the dark making shapes out of shadows. The lamp was on. My phone was in my hand. I was wide awake. At some point, without meaning to, I looked toward the vent, and I saw an eye. Not a shadow, not a reflection. Not something that looked like an eye. An actual eye. It was behind the grate, visible through one of the narrow gaps between the metal slats. Open. Wet. Catching the light from my lamp. Looking directly at me. For 1 second, my brain refused to understand what I was seeing. Then the eye blinked. Once, slowly, and disappeared. The moment it vanished, I heard movement behind the wall. A fast, tight sound. Like someone shifting their weight in a space too small to move comfortably. I couldn't breathe. I just stared at the vent. Every part of me wanted to scream, but no sound came out. Then I heard something else. A soft scrape, lower down, then silence. That silence broke whatever frozen state I was in. I moved. I grabbed my phone, my keys, and my wallet from the nightstand. I didn't put shoes on. I didn't turn anything off. I didn't go near the vent. I ran out of my bedroom, down the hallway, past the painted basement door, and out the front door into the rain. I got into my car, locked the doors, and called 911. The dispatcher asked me what my emergency was. I said there was someone inside my wall. Saying it out loud made it sound impossible. The dispatcher paused for just a second. Then she asked if I was safe. I told her I was outside in my car. She told me to stay there, keep the doors locked, and wait for officers. While I sat there, I stared at my apartment windows. My bedroom window was dark, except for the lamp glow behind the curtains. I kept expecting to see someone move past it. I called my landlord twice, no answer. Then I called one of my friends from dinner. She answered half asleep, and the second she heard my voice, she asked what was wrong. I tried to explain it, but I couldn't say the word "I" without starting to shake. 2 officers arrived about 10 minutes later. At first, I could tell they didn't fully believe me. They were polite, but they had that careful tone people use when they think someone might be panicking over nothing. One officer stayed with me outside, while the other went in. A minute later, the second officer followed. I sat in the car with the heater running, soaked socks on the floor mat, watching their flashlights move behind my curtains. They were inside for a long time, much longer than I expected. After maybe 20 minutes, one of them came back outside. His expression was completely different from when he'd arrived. He asked me how long I'd lived there. I said 6 months. Then he asked, "Have you ever been in the basement?" I said no. He looked back at the house, then back at me. "Who has access to it?" I told him the landlord said nobody did. The officer didn't respond right away. Then he asked me for the landlord's number. That's when I knew they had found something. The basement door in my hallway, the one I thought was painted shut, did open. Just not from my side. From inside the basement, the latch still worked. The paint on my side made it look sealed, but the door itself wasn't actually secured. Someone inside the basement could push it open if they wanted to. And someone had. The basement wasn't empty. It wasn't even unused. Police found a sleeping bag tucked behind an old furnace, a backpack, food wrappers, bottled water, batteries, a camping lantern, a small pile of clothes. There were also cigarettes, empty cans, and a plastic grocery bag full of trash. Someone had been living there. Not for a night, not for a weekend, for weeks, maybe longer. The basement had an old exterior entrance around the side of the house, a coal chute or cellar access, half hidden behind overgrown bushes. I had never noticed it because I never went around that side of the house. The outside hatch had a broken lock. Whoever was staying down there had been using that entrance to come and go without ever passing my front door. But that wasn't the worst part. The worst part was what they found near my bedroom, the basement ceiling, connected to a narrow crawl space behind some of the interior walls in my apartment. In one section, someone had carefully removed part of the old wood and plaster. Not enough to make a big hole, just enough to create a hidden passage into the dead space behind the wall where my bed was. Behind the vent, police found scuff marks, a small folding stool, a flashlight with weak batteries, and a spot on the floor worn smooth from use. The officer explained it to me later, gently. Whoever had been living down there had discovered he could position himself behind that old vent and see into my bedroom. My bed was directly across from it. The angle lined up, not perfectly, but enough. Enough to watch, enough to wait, enough for me to see his eye when he got too close. I felt sick when he told me, because suddenly the last few weeks rearranged themselves in my head. The noises, the feeling of being watched, the faint light behind the grate, the bedroom door I thought I'd left closed. All of it had an explanation, a real one, and somehow that made it worse. The landlord arrived around 1 a.m, looking half asleep and genuinely confused. When the officers showed him the basement, he went pale. He swore he had no idea anyone was down there. He said the basement was supposed to be locked from the outside and that he hadn't gone in for months. Maybe he was lying. Maybe he wasn't. I honestly don't know. The police searched the whole property that night. The upstairs unit, the basement, the crawl spaces, the yard. Whoever had been there was gone. There was no sign of him except what he left behind. They thought he may have heard me leave or heard the 911 call through the vent and used the exterior basement hatch to escape before officers arrived. That thought still makes my stomach turn. While I was sitting in my car, watching the windows, he may have been climbing out from under the house, only a few yards away from me. They took fingerprints. They took the sleeping bag. They collected the flashlight and some of the trash, but nothing ever came of it. No arrest, no name, no explanation for who he was or how long he'd been there. A week later, one of the officers called to update me. He said they hadn't found anything useful. Then, after a pause, he told me something he probably didn't have to tell me. He said the amount of supplies in the basement suggested the person had been comfortable there. Organized. Like it wasn't a random place to sleep. Like it was a setup, a routine. That hit me harder than anything else. Because breaking into someone's home is terrifying. But this was different. This was someone living beneath me, learning the sounds of my apartment, knowing when I got home, knowing when I went to bed, knowing when I turned the lamp off. And at some point, watching me had become part of that routine. I didn't spend another night there. My friend came and picked me up that same night. I slept on her couch. 2 days later, a group of friends helped me collect some clothes and important things. I didn't go into the bedroom alone. I never stood near that vent again. A moving company got the rest of my belongings the following week. The landlord let me break the lease without arguing. I think he was afraid I'd sue him. Maybe I should have. I just wanted to be gone. For months afterward, I couldn't sleep without lights on. Every apartment I looked at, I asked if there was a basement. If there was, I didn't rent it. I moved into a newer building on the 3rd floor. No vents near the floor. No crawl spaces. No old doors painted shut. Even now, 3 years later, I still check. When I move furniture, I look behind it. When I see an old vent, I don't stand near it. When I wake up in the middle of the night and feel watched, I turn on the light and stay still for a while. People think I'm overreacting when I tell them. They say it was one person, one bad situation, one old house. Maybe they're right, but that's not the lesson I took from it. The lesson I took is that you can lock every door you know about and still not know all the ways into your own home. You can live above someone for weeks and have no idea. You can sleep 3 feet from a wall and never know there's a person behind it. And the worst part isn't that he was there. It's that he was quiet enough, patient enough, and comfortable enough that if I hadn't looked at the vent at the exact moment I did, I might never have known at all. I might have kept sleeping in that room, kept turning off the lamp, kept telling myself old houses make noises, and he might have kept watching. That's why I don't live in old converted houses anymore. That's why I don't trust sealed doors. And that's why, if I ever see even the smallest movement in a vent again, I won't stop to prove what it is. I'll leave. Because the night I saw that eye in my bedroom wall, I learned something I wish I could forget. Sometimes the thing watching you isn't outside your window. Sometimes it's closer. Sometimes it's already in the house. And sometimes all that's between you and it is a painted piece of metal with gaps just wide enough for an eye. I worked security for 11 years. Banks, construction sites, office buildings, a mall for a while, and more warehouses than I can remember. When you work nights long enough, you get used to empty buildings. You learn their sounds, pipes knocking, metal roofs settling, old vac systems kicking on, rats moving through walls, wind pushing against loading bay doors. Most people hear those things and get scared. I heard them and knew I was alone. That's what made this night different. Because that night, I wasn't. My name is Ray. I was 46 when this happened, working night security in the Port District of Tacoma, Washington. The building was an old freight warehouse near the water. Massive place. Hundreds of thousands of square feet. Long rows of industrial racking, stacked 3 and 4 levels high, with pallets, crates, and wrapped storage containers. The company that owned it used it for overflow inventory. During the day, forklifts moved through it constantly. At night, it was just me. My shift ran from 7 at night to 6 in the morning. I sat in a small security office near the front entrance, watched the camera feeds, checked the access panel, and once an hour I walked a patrol route through the building. The route was simple: front office, main aisle, north loading doors, back racking, south fire exit, electrical room, then back to the office. At each checkpoint, I scanned a little tag with my guard phone. That's how the company knew I had actually walked the route. I'd been assigned there for about 3 months. By then, I knew the building well. I knew which loading door rattled in the wind. I knew which section of racking made a deep metal groan at midnight when the temperature dropped. I knew the place. At least I thought I did. This happened on a rainy night in December. The rain was hitting the metal roof so hard it sounded like static. That wasn't unusual near the port. The whole building had that cold, damp-feeling old warehouses get in winter, where your flashlight beam almost seems to catch the moisture in the air. My 10 o'clock patrol was normal. My 11 o'clock patrol was normal. A little after midnight, I started the next round. I took my flashlight, my radio, and the guard phone, then stepped out of the office into the warehouse. Most of the overhead lights were off at night to save power. Only emergency lights stayed on, spaced far apart along the main aisles. Everything between them was shadow. I walked the route the way I always did. Front office checkpoint, main aisle, north loading doors, everything secure. Then I headed into the back racking. That was the darkest part of the building. The shelves were so tall and packed so tightly that my flashlight only showed a narrow tunnel ahead of me. The farther back I went, the more the sounds changed. The rain on the roof got muffled. My own footsteps sounded closer. I scanned the checkpoint on the back rack column. The guard phone beeped, and then I heard a voice. Quiet, close. Come here. I stopped immediately. At first, I thought it was the radio. Sometimes another guard from a different post would accidentally hit the wrong channel. But my radio was silent. No static, no light, nothing. I raised my flashlight and swept it down the aisle. Nothing. Just pallets, shrink wrap, steel beams, and darkness. I called out, "Security." "Who's there?" No answer. I listened. Only rain. I stood there for almost a full minute. Then I checked the next aisle. Empty. The aisle after that. Empty. No footprints in the dust. No open doors. No broken-in window. I told myself I'd misheard something. Warehouses do that. Sound bounces strangely between metal racks. The rain, the HVAC, the building shifting. Sometimes your brain turns noise into words. I finished the patrol and went back to the office. Still, I checked the cameras. Nothing. The exterior doors were secure. The access panel showed no alarms, no motion alerts. No one had entered. At 1 o'clock, I went out again. I didn't want to admit it, but I was tense before I even reached the back racking. I kept my flashlight higher than usual, checking gaps between pallets, looking under low shelves, listening harder than I needed to. I reached the same checkpoint, scanned it. The phone beeped, and the voice came again. "Come here." This time it was clearer, not loud, not shouted. A low voice, almost a whisper. It sounded like a man. I spun around and pointed my flashlight down the aisle behind me. "Nothing," I shouted. "This building is closed. Show yourself now." Silence. Then something moved. Not in front of me, above me. Somewhere higher in the racking, a small scrape of metal. I aimed the flashlight upward. The beam caught stacked pallets wrapped in black plastic. For 1 second, I thought I saw a shape pull back behind them. I wasn't sure. I radioed dispatch. "Control, this is Ray at Dockside Storage. Possible intruder inside the building. I'm checking now." The dispatcher asked if I needed police. I looked around the dark aisle. Nothing moved. I didn't want to overreact. "Not yet," I said. "Stand by. I'll confirm." That was a mistake. I should have called police right then. Instead, I did what security guards are trained to do too often. I investigated. I walked the next aisle over and shined my light down its length. Empty. I checked the fire exit. Still locked from the inside. I checked the nearest loading bay. Secured. No sign of entry. But when I came back past the same rack, I noticed something on the floor. A cigarette butt. Fresh. Not old warehouse trash. The filter was still slightly damp at the end, like someone had dropped it recently. Nobody smoked inside that building. I stood staring at it, and that's when I knew I hadn't imagined the voice. Someone was inside. I called dispatch again and told them I had evidence of an intruder. This time I requested police. The dispatcher said officers were being sent. I started walking back toward the office. I was halfway down the main aisle when the warehouse intercom clicked. That building had an old paging system. We barely used it. The microphone was mounted in the shipping office near the loading docks, all the way on the opposite side of the warehouse. The speakers crackled once, then a voice came through. "Ray." I froze. It was the same voice. Low, calm, close to the microphone. "Come here, Ray." My stomach dropped. There are certain moments where your body understands danger faster than your mind does. That was one of them. He knew my name because my name was printed on the badge clipped to my jacket. Or maybe he'd heard dispatch say it over the radio. Either way, hearing it over the intercom inside that empty warehouse made the whole place feel different. It meant he wasn't just hiding. He was watching me. I didn't respond. I walked faster. The intercom clicked again. "I'm back here." His voice echoed through the speakers above me. "Come here." I kept moving. Then I heard another sound behind me. Footsteps. Not loud, not running. Just a few steps somewhere behind the racks, matching my direction. I turned and swept the flashlight back. The aisle was empty, but the footsteps stopped when I stopped. I started walking again. A second later, they started again. That was enough. I stopped pretending this was a normal trespasser. I went straight to the security office, locked the door, and pulled up all the camera feeds. Most of the cameras covered entrances, loading docks, and main aisles. The back racking had blind spots. A lot of them. I clicked through the feeds one by one. Nothing. Then I saw movement on camera 6. The shipping office. A person stepped out of frame, only for a second. Dark hoodie, gloved hand, then gone. I told dispatch I had visual confirmation and that police needed to enter through the front. While I was still on the radio, something tapped on the glass of the security office. 3 light taps, right beside my head. I turned so fast I nearly dropped the radio. The security office had a window facing the warehouse floor. Outside that window, in the darkness beyond the glass, a man was standing there, maybe 10 feet away, hood up, face mostly covered, just watching me. I raised my flashlight and hit him with the beam. The second the light touched him, he moved behind a rack column and disappeared. I locked the office door again, even though it was already locked. My hand was shaking. The dispatcher told me officers were 5 minutes out. 5 minutes. Doesn't sound long until you're sitting in a glass office inside a warehouse with someone outside who knows exactly where you are. The intercom clicked again. "Ray." I didn't answer. "Come here." The voice was different now, still calm, but there was something under it. Irritation. The office phone rang. That nearly made me jump out of my skin. It was the internal line. Only phones inside the building could call it. I let it ring. It rang 6 times, stopped, then started again. I stared at it. On the 3rd ring, I picked up but said nothing. For a second, there was only breathing. Then the voice said, very softly, "You should have kept walking." I slammed the phone down. A second later, the lights in the main aisle went out. Not all the lights. Just the section closest to the security office. The emergency lights stayed on, but they were weak, red, barely enough to see. Someone had access to the electrical room, or he knew where the breaker panel was. I backed away from the office window and stood against the far wall, with the radio in one hand and flashlight in the other. Then I saw him again, not at the window, on camera 2, main aisle, walking slowly toward the front. But then another figure appeared behind him. For one moment, both were visible. 2 men, not one. The second man was carrying something long in his right hand, maybe a pry bar, maybe a pipe. Then both stepped out of camera view. I whispered into the radio, "There are 2. Repeat, 2 intruders inside." Dispatch told me officers were arriving. Almost at the same time, I heard pounding at the front entrance. Police. I yelled through the office door, "Front entrance. I'm in the security office." The 2 men must have heard it too, because the warehouse suddenly came alive. Fast footsteps, metal clanging, something crashing to the floor deep in the racks. The intercom clicked one last time. This time there was no voice, just breathing. Then the sound of someone laughing once under their breath. Police entered less than a minute later. 3 officers came in with flashlights and weapons drawn. I stayed in the office while they searched. They found the shipping office empty. The microphone for the intercom was off the hook. The electrical room door was open. Several breakers had been switched off. In the back racking, they found more cigarette butts, a half-empty water bottle, and a small backpack hidden behind pallets. Inside the backpack were gloves, zip ties, a cheap 2-way radio, and a folding knife. They also found something that made the whole thing worse. A printed floor plan of the warehouse. Not official, but detailed enough. Entrances marked, blind spots marked, camera locations marked, and one spot circled in red, the back racking checkpoint. The exact place where I had first heard the voice. The police believed the men had been inside before my shift started. They probably entered during the day, hid somewhere in the racking, and waited until the building was locked. They knew the patrol route. They knew where I had to walk. They knew the blind spots. And the voice? That was bait. They were trying to lure me deeper into the racks, away from cameras, away from the office, into the one section of the warehouse where nobody would see what happened. The officers searched for over an hour. They didn't find the men. The warehouse had old access points nobody used anymore. Maintenance hatches, roof ladders, a broken loading door sensor that had been reported months earlier and never fixed. Somewhere in that building, they found a way out. The company reviewed the footage the next day. Most of it was useless. Dark clothing, covered faces, no clear plates. But one clip showed enough to confirm what police suspected. At 6:12 p.m., before my shift started, Two men walked in through a side-loading entrance behind a group of day workers moving pallets. They blended in for a few seconds, then slipped into the racking. No one noticed. They had been hiding inside for nearly 6 hours before I heard the first voice. I quit that morning. I didn't wait for the end of the week. I didn't ask to be transferred. I handed in my badge and told the supervisor I was done. He tried to talk me out of it until the police showed him the floor plan and the backpack. After that, he stopped. A few days later, one of the officers called me. He said they hadn't identified the men, but they believed the warehouse may have been targeted for a theft. The company stored expensive electronics in one of the back sections, and the circled checkpoint was near the route between that inventory and an old loading bay. Maybe they planned to rob the place and needed me out of the way. Maybe they planned to hurt me. Maybe both. I'll never know, but I know this. They were patient. They waited in the dark for hours. They learned the cameras. They learned the route. They waited until I was alone in the deepest part of that warehouse and used the simplest possible thing to pull me closer. A voice. Come here. That's what still bothers me. Not the knife, not the zip ties, not even the floor plan. It's how close I came to doing exactly what they wanted. Because when you hear a person whisper from the dark, part of you wants to know who it is. Part of you wants to step closer. Part of you thinks, if I just shine the light a little farther, I'll understand. That's the part they were counting on. I don't work warehouse security anymore. I don't take posts with blind spots. And I don't answer voices from the dark. Because now I know that sometimes when someone calls you closer, it's not because they need help. It's because you're already exactly where they wanted you. And they just need you to take a few more steps. A customer asked me to bring the pizza inside. Then he called me from a dark room. Most of being a delivery driver is nothing. You hand over a bag. You say, have a good night. You drive away. You stop expecting anything. And that's exactly why I almost didn't notice the one thing that saved me, because I'd stopped paying attention to anything at all. It took a voice that didn't match to wake me up. My name is Danny. I was 19, living in Salem, Oregon, delivering pizzas for a place in a normal middle-class part of town. Not the country, not bad neighborhoods, regular suburbs, cul-de-sacs, two-car garages, kids' bikes in the yards, the safest seeming places in the world. I'd been doing it about a year. It was easy money for a teenager, and I liked driving around at night with the radio on. Nothing bad had ever happened to me. That's the headspace I was in. Bored, comfortable on autopilot. This was a Sunday night in February, raining, slow. Around 9, I got an order to a house in one of those nice, quiet neighborhoods. A 2-story place, nothing remarkable, lights on downstairs. Big order, actually. 3 pizzas and sides, like a family order or a small party. I pulled up, grabbed the bags, walked up to the door in the rain, and rang the bell. A man answered, middle-aged, normal-looking, polite, glasses, a sweater, looked like somebody's dad. He opened the door and smiled and said, "Oh, great, thank you. Hey, would you mind bringing those into the kitchen for me? My hands are full. My wife's just settling the kids. Kitchen's right through there." And he stepped back and held the door open, gesturing down the hallway toward the back of the house where I could see a lit kitchen. And here's the thing, this happens. People ask you to bring it to the kitchen, especially big orders, especially when it's raining and they don't want to juggle 3 pizza boxes at the door. It's not standard. We're supposed to hand off at the door, but it's not alarming either. The house was nice. The guy looked like a dad. There were kid-sized shoes by the door, a little jacket on a hook. Everything said normal family home. So I stepped inside and started down the hall toward the kitchen. The man closed the door behind me, which, again, it was raining. Of course he closed the door. I didn't think anything of it. I walked into the kitchen and set the bags on the counter and turned to get my money, or to confirm the tip on the card. And the man had followed me in and was standing kind of between me and the hallway, still smiling. And he said, "Let me just grab my wallet, it's upstairs." 2 seconds, and he went up the stairs. So I waited in the kitchen, and I started slowly to feel like something was off, but I couldn't pin it. And I want to be honest about how dull and gradual it was, because it wasn't a lightning bolt, it was little things. The house was very quiet for a place that supposedly had a wife, settling kids, and a party's worth of food coming. Too quiet. The kitchen, now that I was standing in it, didn't look like a kitchen where a family was about to eat 3 pizzas. No plates out, no drinks, no activity, lights on, but nothing happening. And the food. 3 pizzas and sides is a lot for a house with no sound in it. Then the man called down from upstairs, from a room up there with no light on. I could see the top of the stairs from the kitchen, and it was dark up there. His voice came down. "Hey, could you come up here a sec? I can't find my wallet, and I want to just give you the card. It's easier. Come up here." Into the dark upstairs of a stranger's house, and every comfortable, bored autopilot instinct in me said, "Sure, fine, go up. Get the money. It's just a dad who lost his wallet." But I didn't move, and I didn't move because of one specific thing, and it's so small I almost talked myself out of it, even as it was happening. The voice calling me from upstairs didn't sound right, not like a different person. It was his voice. But when he'd been standing in front of me at the door and in the kitchen, his voice had been higher, lighter, a little nervous friendly. That's customer service register. The voice calling down the stairs was lower, calmer, slower, like a man who'd stopped performing. Same person. But the friendly part had been switched off, and what was underneath it was flat and patient, and didn't match the sweater and glasses, Dad who'd opened the door, at all. It's hard to explain how much that tiny mismatch rattled me. It was like watching someone you know make a face you've never seen them make. The voice that called me upstairs was the real one, and the one at the door had been the costume. I didn't go up. Instead, I called back, loud. "You know what? I've actually got 3 more deliveries in the car getting cold. Can you just bring the card down? Or I can run the order as cash on my end and you settle later?" Just words, just noise. But I said it while I was already moving, quietly, back toward the front door. And as I said it, I glanced, the way you do, around the kitchen and the hallway with new eyes. Eyes that were finally awake. And I noticed the things autopilot had skated right past. The kid's shoes by the door were all the same size, arranged too neatly, dusty. The little jacket on the hook had a price tag still hanging off the sleeve. There were no family photos anywhere on the walls of the hallway. Just bare nail holes where pictures used to be. And the front door he'd closed behind me had a deadbolt, and the deadbolt was turned, the little knob horizontal, locked, even though we'd just come in. The house was a set, the dad was a costume, and I was a 19-year-old who'd walked into the middle of it because a guy in a sweater asked nicely. Upstairs, the voice, the flat, patient, real one said, "I'm right up here. Come on up. Don't make me come down." I went for the door. I flipped the deadbolt. My hands barely worked, and I got it open, and I was out in the rain and down the driveway to my car faster than I've ever moved, and I didn't look back to see if he came down the stairs because I didn't want to know. I got in, locked it, and drove, and I called the store, and then the police from a gas station a mile away, shaking so hard I could barely talk. The police went to the house, and what they found is the part that still doesn't sit right in me years later. The house was a rental. It had been rented furnished, short-term, paid in cash about a week before. The man was gone by the time police arrived, out a back door. No car in the driveway that anybody could describe. There was no wife. There were no kids. The kid's shoes, the little jacket with the tag still on it, were props recently bought, staged by the door to make the place read as a family home to exactly the kind of bored, teenage delivery driver they'd lure there. The family-size order had been placed to guarantee a driver would have his hands full and his guard down, and would be willing to step inside to set it all down. And upstairs in the dark room he'd been calling me toward, the police found that the door had a bolt on the outside, a lock to keep something, someone, in, not out. They wouldn't tell me more than that. The detective who took my final statement just looked at me for a long moment and said, You understand how close that was. You understand why we need you to be exact about everything you remember. They never told me what that room was for. I've never wanted to imagine it, but the lock was on the outside of the door. They never caught him. The rental was a dead end, cash, and a fake name. The order was placed through an account made that day. He was gone, and for all I know, he rented another furnished house in another quiet neighborhood the next week and set out the same dusty little shoes by the door and waited for the next bored kid who'd stopped paying attention. I quit delivering within the month. And the thing I carry from it isn't a fear of nice houses or polite men, though I've got some of that. It's this. The trap was built entirely out of normal. A dad, a sweater, pizza, kid shoes by the door, a guy who lost his wallet upstairs. Every single piece of it was designed to be so ordinary that your guard never goes up, because there's nothing to put it up against. The only thing in that whole house that was true, the only thing that wasn't part of the costume, was the voice that came down the stairs when he forgot to keep performing. So that's what I trust now. Not whether something looks safe. Everything can be made to look safe. I trust the moment when the mask slips, even a little, even in something as small as a voice going flat. That mismatch is the realest thing you'll ever hear. When you hear it, don't go up the stairs. Whatever's up there, whatever reason they give you, don't go up the stairs. A man was watching me through the grocery store window. Then he got inside. You'd think a brightly lit grocery store would be the safest place in the world to be at night. All those lights, all that glass, everything visible. That's exactly what I thought too. But I learned that a wall of bright windows at night doesn't keep the dark out. It just means the dark can see you perfectly, and you can't see it at all. My name is Sophia. I was 23, working at a mid-sized grocery store in Eugene, Oregon. One of those stores that stayed open till 11, but had a skeleton crew the last couple of hours. On the closing shift, after about 9, it was usually just me on register, one stocker somewhere in the back aisles, and a manager doing paperwork in the office. The store sat at the end of a strip mall with a big parking lot out front, and the entire front wall of the store was glass, those huge windows that look out over the lot. In the daytime, it felt open and nice. At night, with the store lit up and the lot dark, those windows turned into mirrors from the inside. I could see myself, the registers, the aisles behind me. I could not see out into the lot at all. Anyone out there in the dark, though, could see me lit up at my register like I was on a stage. I'd worked there about a year and never thought twice about it, until this one night in October. It was a slow, rainy Tuesday, close to 10, maybe an hour before close. The store was dead. I'd had maybe 2 customers in the last half hour. I was at my register, bored, restocking the gum and the candy, when I got that feeling, the one everybody knows and everybody ignores, that I was being watched. I looked up, and in the big front window, all I could see was the bright reflection of the store and myself. But the feeling wouldn't go away. So I cupped my hands against the glass to cut the glare and looked out into the lot. There was a man standing out there. Not near the doors, not walking in. He was standing way out in the lot, past the first few rows of parking, just at the edge where the light from the windows faded into the dark, standing still, facing the store. Facing me. Just standing in the rain. No umbrella, not moving, looking in. My first thought was the normal one. Somebody waiting for a ride, somebody on a phone call, somebody whose wife was shopping. People stand in parking lots. I went back to my gum, but a couple minutes later, I looked up and he'd moved closer, still not coming toward the doors. He'd moved sideways, along the front of the store, and was now standing closer to the glass, maybe 2 rows out, still facing in, still watching, and now I could see him a little better. A big guy, hood up, hands in his pockets, just standing in the rain, looking through the window at the registers. At me, I did what you do. I told myself to stop being paranoid, but I also did the small, smart thing. I walked back toward the office and told my manager, a woman named Renata, that there was a guy in the lot who'd been standing there a while, watching the store, and it was creeping me out. Renata was great. She didn't brush me off. She came up front with me and looked, and by then the guy had moved again, and now he was standing right up near the glass, close, maybe 15 feet from the front doors, just outside the light, looking in at the two of us looking out at him. Renata didn't like it either. She said we'd close a little early. It was 10, close enough to 11, and she went to call the other employee, the stalker, up from the back so we could all leave together. And she said she'd lock the front doors now, so he couldn't just walk in while we shut down. She went to the front doors and turned the lock, and the man outside watched her do it. And when the lock clicked, he smiled. We both saw it. He smiled, and then he turned and walked off into the dark of the lot, unhurried, and was gone. We were relieved. We actually laughed a little, the nervous kind. Renata went to the back to get the stalker, a kid named Matteo, and to start the closing procedures, and I started shutting down my register. The doors were locked. The creepy guy was gone. It was over. Except a few minutes later, Renata came back up front, and her face was wrong. She said quietly, "Sophia, Matteo's not in the back, and the back stockroom door. The one to the loading dock. It's unlocked. It's supposed to be locked after the last delivery." And the relief just drained right out of me. Because we'd been so focused on the man at the front window, on the front doors, on locking him out, and the whole time there was a back of the store, a loading dock, a stockroom door, and the man in the lot had spent 20 minutes, making very sure we were all watching him through the front glass. He hadn't been trying to get in the front. He'd been keeping our eyes on the front. Renata grabbed my arm and we both went still, listening, and from somewhere back in the store, the dark back corner where the lights got shut off first during closing, back by the stockroom, we heard it, a voice, low, calling out friendly sing-song the way you'd call a pet. "Hello? Anybody still here? Store's closed, right?" A man's voice, inside the store, back where Matteo should have been and wasn't. I have never felt fear like that. The specific horror of realizing the locked door you were relying on had the threat on the inside of it. We were locked in, with him. Renata, thank God, kept her head. She pulled me, fast and quiet, not toward the front doors, which were locked and would take precious seconds of fumbling with keys in full view, but back toward the office, which had a heavy door and a phone and, she knew, a separate exit through a side corridor. We got into the office, and she locked it, and she called 911, and we crouched down below the window in the door, and we listened to that voice move through the store, calling out, still friendly. "Hello? I think somebody's still here. I just need a minute." Moving up the aisles toward the front, toward the office, in no hurry at all. The police were fast, under 5 minutes, because a grocery store after close with a 911 call gets a quick response. We heard, from the office, the front of the store light up with red and blue through all that glass, and we heard the man's footsteps stop and then move fast, back toward the rear of the store, toward the loading dock he'd come in through. By the time officers got inside, he was out the back and gone across the lot behind the strip mall. They found Matteo. He was okay. And this is the part that makes the whole thing worse, somehow. Matteo had been out at the loading dock having a smoke break, propped the dock door open like he wasn't supposed to, and the man had simply walked up to him in the dark out back, friendly, said he was looking for the manager about a delivery issue, and Matteo, 19, trying to be helpful, had let him in and pointed him toward the front, then gone back to his cigarette, never thinking twice. The performance at the front window, the standing in the rain, the smiling when Renata locked the door. All of it was to fix our attention on the front while his real way in was a teenager propping a door at the back. They never caught him. No car anyone saw. Gone into the dark behind the strip mall. The detective told us the front window act was deliberate misdirection. That a person standing in a lot, watching you is alarming and is meant to be. Because while you're watching the thing that scares you, you stop watching everything else. He said the smile when the door locked was the tell. The man wanted us to feel safe, wanted us to think we'd won, wanted us to relax and split up and turn the front lights off, because he was already planning to be inside. What stays with me isn't the voice, though I still hear that friendly hello sometimes when a store is quiet. What stays with me is the lock clicking and the smile. The moment we thought we'd made ourselves safe was the exact moment he'd been waiting for. We locked the door and felt the relief wash over us, and on the other side of the glass, a man smiled because we'd done exactly what he wanted. Now wherever I am, a store, an office, anywhere with a front and a back, I don't ask, is the scary thing locked out? I ask, where's the other door? Because the man you can see, standing in the rain, watching you through the glass, he's not the problem, he's the distraction. The problem is the door nobody's watching, and the friendly voice that's already inside, calling out to if you're alone. A man was calling for help in my backyard. But he wasn't alone. The hardest thing I've ever done was not help someone who was calling for help. Everything in you, everything good in you says go now. Somebody needs you. I've had to make peace with the fact that the same instinct that makes you a decent person is the exact thing they count on to get you to open the door. My name is Cole. I was 34, living with my wife in a house on the outskirts of Boise, Idaho. Not way out in the country, but the edge. A newer neighborhood that backed onto open land, a field, and then a greenbelt with a walking path along a canal. Our back fence opened onto that field. It was the reason we bought the house, honestly. Quiet, open space behind us. No neighbors directly at our back. In the daytime, it was perfect. People walked dogs on the path. Kids cut across the field. It felt safe and a little bit rural, and we loved it. My wife, Megan, was out of town this particular night, visiting her sister, 2 days away, so it was just me. A weeknight in late September, raining lightly, cool. I'd had dinner, I was watching something. The house was locked up the way I always lock it, maybe 10:30, 11, nothing on my mind, just a quiet night home alone. And then, from the back of the house, from out in the field behind our fence, I heard a man yelling, "Help! Somebody! Help me, please!" I was up off the couch before I even thought about it. That's the instinct. Somebody's hurt out there. I went to the back of the house, to the sliding door that looked out over our small yard, and the back fence, and the dark field beyond. I couldn't see anything. It was black out there past our motion light, which had clicked on and lit up just our yard. But I could hear him, out in the field somewhere, maybe 50, 60 yards out. "Help! I think I broke my leg. Please, is anybody there? Help me!" My hand was on the lock of the sliding door. I want you to understand how automatic it was. A man is hurt in the field behind my house, alone, in the rain, in the dark, calling for help. Of course you go. Of course you grab a flashlight and go out there. That's not even a decision. That's just what a person does. What stopped me, and I've gone over this 1,000 times, was something small and stupid that my brain snagged on as I was unlocking the door. He kept calling, "Help me. Is anybody there? Help." But he wasn't calling toward the canal path where people walk, where a hurt person would logically yell for help. The path was off to the left. He was facing my house. Every help was aimed directly at my back windows, at my yard, at the one lit up house with a single guy in it. A man who'd really fallen and broken his leg in a dark field yells in every direction, or toward the path, or just yells. This man was calling at my house specifically, like he knew exactly which house had someone in it, and which house was worth calling to. It made me pause. Just pause, with my hand on the lock. And in that pause, instead of opening the door, I did something that probably saved my life. I turned off the lights inside the house. All of them, fast, so I wasn't lit up, so I could see out instead of being seen. And I stood at the side of the sliding door in the dark, and I looked. And once my eyes adjusted, past the edge of my motion light, out in the dark field I could see him, a shape. A man, sure enough, maybe 60 yards out. But he wasn't down on the ground like a man with a broken leg. He was standing up in the field, calling, "Help me, I'm hurt, please," while standing perfectly upright and still. and he wasn't alone. There were two other shapes out there in the dark with him, spread out, one off to the right, closer to my fence already, low, moving, one further back, while the man in the middle kept calling out his sad, urgent, broken leg call toward my house. The other two were quietly moving up on the fence, on the yard, from the sides, fanning out toward the gate, the back corner, the way you'd move if you wanted to be at the door. The second it opened, the yelling man was the lure. He was the reason I'd come to the back of the house, the reason I'd unlock the door, the reason I'd step out into the yard with a flashlight, focused on him, 60 yards out, while the other two came over the fence and were on me before I ever reached him. I backed away from that door so fast I knocked over a lamp in the dark, and I did the only smart things I had in me. I called 911, and I turned my motion lights and every outside light I had back on, flipped the whole exterior of the house bright, and I yelled, loud, through the door, "I've called the police, they're on their way right now." Not brave, just loud and shaking. And the effect was immediate. The man stopped calling for help. Just stopped, mid-sentence, like a switch, and out in the suddenly lit edge of the yard, I saw the two shapes near my fence freeze, then turn, and all three of them moved off. Not running in a panic, just leaving, quick and quiet, back into the dark field toward the green belt, gone before the police arrived, a few minutes later. The injured man walked away on two perfectly good legs. The police took it seriously. They told me what I'd already half figured out, that a person in distress is one of the oldest ways to get someone to open a locked door or come outside alone, especially a house they've watched long enough to know there's just one person home. And that was the part that chilled me most. They'd known. They'd known Megan was gone, or known enough, known there was a single guy in that house that night. The officer asked if anyone could have been watching the place, and I thought about the open field behind us, the walking path, how anyone could stroll that canal path day after day and see exactly who came and went, see my wife's car leave with a suitcase, see me alone. They never caught them. 3 figures into a green belt at night, no vehicle anyone saw, nothing taken because they never got in. The officer told me, plainly, that I should be glad I never opened the door, and gladder I never went out into that field. He said the math of it out loud. One man calling you out into the open, 60 yards from your house, in the dark, while 2 more wait at the fence, and he didn't have to finish the thought. Here's what I live with now, and it's a strange weight. I didn't help a man who was calling for help. If I'm wrong, if by some chance there was ever a real hurt man out there, and I'm telling myself a story to feel okay, then I did something unforgivable. But I saw him stand up. I saw the other 2. I saw all 3 walk away on good legs the second the lights came on and the police were coming. And I've had to accept that the goodness in me, the part that jumped off the couch and ran to the back door, the part that almost flipped that lock, that part wasn't a flaw, but it was the exact thing they were fishing for. They weren't hunting my fear. They were hunting my decency. So now I have a rule, and Megan and I both live by it. If someone needs help outside our house at night, we help. By calling the police, by turning on every light, by yelling that help is coming. We do not open the door. We do not go out into the dark. You can be a good person and a careful one at the same time. You can call for help for someone without becoming the next person who needs it. Because the worst ones don't come at you with a weapon and a threat. They come at you with someone crying for help in the dark, and they wait to see if you're good enough and foolish enough to open the door. I let a stranger into the gas station during a storm. Then I saw blood. On his hands, I've thought a lot about the difference between a scared person and a dangerous one, because for about an hour one night, I had them mixed up, and I spent that hour being kind to the wrong fear. By the time I understood which was which, the door was already locked, with both of us on the inside. My name is Wes. I was 28, working the overnight shift at a gas station out on a highway in rural Nevada. One of those lonely stops in the high desert where the next anything is 40 miles in either direction. Just the station, the pumps, a little convenience store, and a whole lot of dark scrubland and mountains in every direction. I worked 10 p.m. to 6 a.m. alone. On a normal night, I'd see a handful of truckers, a few late travelers, and otherwise just sit behind the counter under the fluorescent lights with the desert pressing black against the windows. This night there was a storm, a big one, the kind the desert gets a few times a year. Wind howling, rain coming down in sheets, lightning walking across the mountains. The kind of storm that knocks the power flickering and makes you glad you're inside. Around 1 a.m, no customers for an hour. Just me and the storm and the buzzing lights. And then headlights swung into the lot, fast, crooked, and a car kind of lurched to a stop near the doors, not at the pumps. A man got out into the pouring rain and came to the glass doors and pulled at them. I had them locked, the way we did after midnight, serving through the little window, and he was banging on the glass, soaked, frantic, yelling to be let in. Please, please, you have to let me in. Please open up. He looked terrible, drenched, wide-eyed, shaking, looking back over his shoulder at the dark highway behind him like something was chasing him. Every instinct I had said, this is a man in trouble, a man running from something, scared half to death. So I did what I think most people would do. I unlocked the door and let him in out of the storm. He came in fast and immediately said, "Lock it. Please, lock the door. Lock it." And he was so panicked, so insistent that I did. I locked the door behind him. And that's the moment, looking back, that I handed over something I didn't know I was handing over. I locked the two of us in together, on his say-so, because he was scared and I believed his fear. He was breathing hard, pacing, looking out the windows at the dark lot and the highway. I asked him what was wrong, what happened, was someone after him? And his story came out in pieces, jumpy and not quite connecting. He'd been driving, there'd been another car. They'd run him off. They were following him. They wanted to kill him. They were out there. He kept saying, "They're out there. They're coming. Don't let anybody in, no matter what they say." And I'm standing there, 28 years old, alone, trying to be a good person, getting more and more scared myself, because his fear was contagious. If there were people out there in the storm trying to kill this man, then they'd be coming here, to my lit-up station, where I just locked us in. I offered to call the police, and that's when the first thing snagged. He said no, said it fast and hard. "No cops, no, don't call anybody. We don't need cops, just keep the door locked." A man being chased by people trying to kill him, and the one thing he does not want is the police. I told myself he was just panicked, not thinking straight, traumatized. People in shock say strange things. I kept making excuses for him, because I'd already decided what he was, a victim, and I kept bending every new fact to fit that. Then he asked to use the bathroom to clean up, and as he passed under the bright lights by the counter, I saw his hands, and the rain had washed them pinkish, but it was still there, dried into the creases of his knuckles and under his nails, and smeared on the cuffs of his shirt where the rain hadn't reached. Blood, a lot of it, not a little cut. His hands had had a lot of blood on them recently, and the rain outside had only rinsed the surface, and I had this slow, sick, rearranging moment standing behind that counter, where every piece I'd been forcing into the scared victim shape suddenly clicked into a different shape entirely. The frantic insistence that I lock the door, the no cops, the way he kept watching the highway. Not like a man afraid of who's coming, but like a man watching for who might come. The blood on his hands that wasn't his, because he wasn't hurt anywhere. I'd let him in because he was scared, but he wasn't running from violence. He was running from what he'd just done. And the people he kept saying were out there, coming to kill him. I started to understand there probably weren't any. The only dangerous person for 40 miles in any direction was the one I'd locked inside with me. I cannot describe how loud and quiet that moment was at the same time. I had to keep my face normal. He was watching me now. He'd seen me see his hands, I think, because something in the air changed, and he got very still and very calm, which was so much worse than the panic. The performance of the terrified victim slid off him, and underneath was somebody just watching me, evaluating, deciding how much I'd figured out. What saved me was the layout and a little bit of luck. The counter area had a back door to a storeroom that led to a rear exit. And there was a panic button under the counter that called the alarm, company, and the sheriff, which our manager drilled into us, but which I'd never once thought I'd use. I kept up my voice level and said something about getting him a towel and a coffee. Let me grab those from the back, normal as I could make it, and I stepped back toward the storeroom. And I hit the panic button on the way, and the second I was through the storeroom door, I shoved the bolt on it and went out the back into the storm and ran around the side of the building to my own car. And I sat in it in the pouring rain with the doors locked and my headlights off, watching the lit-up store from the dark. Through the glass, I watched him realize I was gone. He came around the counter, went into the storeroom, found the bolted back door, and then he came back out into the store and stood there in the bright lights. And he stopped pretending entirely. He just methodically started going through the register, the cabinets, looking for me or for cash or both, calm as anything, while I crouched in my dark car in the rain and prayed the sheriff was close. The sheriff was 22 minutes out, which is a lifetime, but he came. The panic button had pulled a deputy who'd been on the highway already. The man saw the light bar coming across the flat desert from miles away. Plenty of warning. And he was in his car and gone the opposite direction before the deputy ever reached the lot. They put out the alert, and here's the part that closes the loop, the part I learned over the next days. There had been a violent incident that night, earlier, at a property some miles back up the highway. The blood on his hands wasn't his. He hadn't been chased as by anybody. He'd been driving away from what he'd done. In a storm, needed to get off the road and out of sight, and he'd found a lit-up gas station with one young guy working alone, and he'd done the smartest, most chilling thing. He didn't break in, didn't threaten me. He performed the one role that would make me open my own locked door and lock it again behind him. The victim, the scared man in the storm. He weaponized the best thing in me. They did catch him, eventually, days later, a few counties over. That's the one mercy in this story, that this one didn't stay a ghost. But the deputy who took my statement said the thing I've never shaken. He said, "You did everything right at the end, but understand, you let him in and you locked the door for him, and you almost didn't call us because he asked you not to. He didn't take any of that from you. You gave it to him because he asked the right way. That's what I carry. Not fear of strangers in storms. I'd still let a genuinely freezing person in out of a desert night, I think, because I don't want to become someone who wouldn't. But I learned that fear can be worn like a costume. That, please help me, I'm scared, lock the door, don't call the cops, can be the most dangerous sentence you'll ever hear, because every word of it is built to switch off the alarm in your head and turn your own kindness into the lock on your own cage. Now, when someone's fear asks me to do something, lock this, don't call that, trust me, hurry, I do the opposite of what the panic wants. I call the people you're not supposed to be afraid to call, because a truly innocent, scared person has never once, in my life, begged me not to phone the police. Only the other kind does that. On Halloween, you stop noticing masks. That's the whole problem. Any other night, if 3 grown men walked into a gas station with their faces covered, everyone would immediately understand what was happening. But on Halloween, people laugh. They assume it's a costume. They assume it's harmless. They assume it's part of the night. I learned the hard way that some people count on that. My name is Nadia. I was 26 when this happened, working the evening shift at a gas station outside Sacramento, California. It wasn't a bad area. The station sat on the corner of a busy suburban road, surrounded by strip malls, fast food places, and neighborhoods full of families. Most nights were predictable. People came in for gas, cigarettes, snacks, energy drinks, lottery tickets. Nothing special. Halloween night started out fun. Parents came in with kids in costumes sitting in the back seat. Teenagers came in wearing face paint and cheap masks. A little girl dressed as a witch gave me a piece of candy from her own bucket, which honestly made my night. I had a bowl of candy by the register, and for the first few hours, the whole place felt cheerful, busy, safe. But after 10:30, the mood changed. The trick-or-treaters were home. The families disappeared. The streets got quiet in that strange way they do after a holiday night, when all the noise drains out at once. By 11:15, the lot was empty. It had started raining lightly, and the glass doors were streaked with water. I was alone in the store, doing closing tasks and watching the clock. We closed at midnight. I remember thinking I just had to get through another 45 minutes. Then a car pulled into the lot. It didn't pull up to a pump. It didn't park under the lights near the entrance. It rolled slowly toward the side of the building and stopped near the air and water machine, where the lot was darker. At first, nobody got out. The car just sat there, engine off, lights off, dark windows. I watched it for a minute waiting. A normal customer would get out. A normal customer would pump gas or come inside. This car just sat there. I told myself not to be dramatic. It was Halloween. People were out late. Maybe they were checking their phones. Maybe someone was changing part of a costume. Maybe they were just being weird. After a few minutes, 3 men got out. All 3 were wearing masks. On any other night, that would have been enough. I would have locked the door immediately, but it was Halloween. I had seen masks all night. Clown masks, monster masks, movie character masks, skeleton masks. So at first, my brain treated them as normal. Just 3 more people in costume. Then they came closer, and I realized their masks weren't really costumes. One wore a plain white plastic mask, completely smooth except for eye holes. The second wore a gray mask with no expression. The third had a black cloth mask that covered his entire face except for the eyes. None of them wore costumes. No capes, no fake blood, no joke. Just dark hoodies, jeans, gloves, and masks. That was when my stomach started to tighten. They came through the front door together. The door chimed. I looked up and forced myself to sound normal. "Hey, happy Halloween. Let me know if you need anything." None of them answered. The white mask walked toward the counter. The gray mask drifted toward the back coolers. The black mask moved down the aisle closest to the door. They were spreading out, not browsing, positioning. It was subtle, but I saw it. I had worked retail long enough to know the difference between customers and people watching a room. These men weren't looking at products. They were looking at exits, corners, cameras, me. I had a panic button under the counter. We all knew it was there, but I had never used it. My hand moved toward it slowly. The white mask stopped at the counter. He didn't put anything down. He just stood there. I could see his eyes through the holes now. Dark eyes. Still. Calm. He wasn't drunk. He wasn't joking. He wasn't trying to scare me for fun. He was waiting. I said, "Can I help you?" He tilted his head slightly. Still no answer. From the back of the store, the gray mask opened one of the cooler doors. I heard glass bottles clink. Then I heard something else. The front door chime. I glanced toward the entrance. The black mask had stepped outside. For half a second, I felt relief. Then I saw him through the window. He wasn't leaving. He was standing outside the front door, looking into the lot, watching the road, watching for cars. That was when I hit the panic button. I pressed it once, then kept my face as normal as I could. Our manager had trained us on it. The alarm company would call the store first. If nobody answered correctly, they would dispatch police. The problem was that I was still alone with them. The white mask leaned closer to the counter. Finally, he spoke. "Open the register." His voice was quiet. No yelling, no panic, just a flat instruction. I froze. He repeated it. "Open it." The gray mask came from the back aisle now. He wasn't holding snacks or drinks. He was holding something low at his side. At first, I thought it was a tool. Then I realized it was a knife. Not huge, but big enough. The black mask was still outside, standing guard. I opened the register. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely press the keys. The drawer popped open. The white mask reached across and started taking cash. Slowly, not rushed, like he had done it before. Then he looked at the office door behind me. "Open that too." That door led to the manager's office. Inside was the safe, the security monitor, the phone, and the back hallway. I said, "I don't have the key." He didn't react. The gray mask moved closer with the knife. The white mask said, "Don't lie." I wasn't lying. I really didn't have the office key. Only the manager had it, and she had left at 10. I told him that. For the first time, his calm expression changed. Not his face, because of the mask, but his body. His shoulders tightened. He looked toward the gray mask, then toward the front window. That small movement told me something important. They were on a schedule. They had expected this to go a certain way. They had expected a manager to be there, or they had expected me to have access to the safe, and now the plan had changed. The store phone rang. All three of them froze. I knew instantly it was the alarm company. The phone rang again. The white mask looked at me. "Answer it." I picked it up. A woman on the other end said, "This is central monitoring. We received an alarm signal. Is everything okay?" The white mask stepped closer. The gray mask raised the knife just enough for me to see it. I knew there was supposed to be a code phrase. If everything was fine, we gave one phrase. If we were in trouble, we gave a different one. But my mind went completely blank. The woman asked again, "Ma'am, is everything okay?" I looked at the white mask, then at the knife. Then I said, "Yeah, sorry, false alarm, Halloween night. Somebody bumped it." There was a pause. The woman said, "Can I have your employee verification?" I gave the wrong number. On purpose. I don't know how I remembered that. I don't know how my brain managed to produce anything useful in that moment. But I gave the wrong number. The woman paused again. Then she said, very calmly, "Thank you. Have a safe night." She hung up. The white mask stared at me for a moment. I thought he knew. I thought he understood I had done something wrong. Then headlights swept across the front windows. A car pulled into the lot. Just a normal customer. A pickup truck. The black mask outside turned toward it immediately. The customer parked at pump 3. He got out and started walking toward the store. The black mask moved fast, intercepting him before he reached the door. I couldn't hear what he said through the glass. But the customer stopped. They talked for a few seconds. Then the customer looked toward me through the window. I don't know what he saw. Maybe my face. Maybe the gray mask with the knife half hidden by his leg. Maybe the open register. Whatever it was, he backed away. He didn't run. He just backed toward his truck, got in, and drove out of the lot. I remember feeling this terrible mix of hope and despair. Hope because maybe he understood. Despair because he left. The white mask looked back at me. Bathroom. I blinked. He pointed toward the hallway near the back. Go. At first I didn't understand. Then I did. They wanted me away from the windows, away from the counter, away from the front of the store. Maybe they planned to lock me in the bathroom. Maybe worse. I said, "Please, just take the money." The gray mask stepped forward. The knife was fully visible now. The white mask said, "Move." I started walking. Every step felt unreal. The hallway to the bathroom was narrow. There was a storage room on the right, bathroom on the left, a rear employee exit at the end, but it had an alarmed push bar. It was supposed to be used only during emergencies. As I walked, I saw the security monitor inside the office through the little interior window. One camera showed the front lot. One showed the aisles. One showed the side of the building. And on that side camera, I saw something that made my stomach drop. There was a second car parked along the side of the station. I had never seen it pull in. 2 more people stood beside it, both in dark clothes, waiting. This wasn't just a robbery. There were at least 5 of them. The 3 inside were only part of it. The gray mask followed me into the hallway. The white mask stayed near the counter. The black mask was still by the front door. I reached the bathroom door. The gray mask said, "Inside." I put my hand on the handle, and then the front door chimed. Everyone turned. 2 police officers walked in. Not storming, not shouting. They entered like normal customers at first, but their hands were already near their weapons. The wrong verification number had worked. The alarm company had sent them. For 1 second, nobody moved. Then everything happened at once. The black mask tried to run out the front and collided with one officer. The gray mask grabbed my arm. I screamed. The officer nearest the door drew his weapon and shouted for everyone to get on the ground. The white mask ran toward the back hallway. The gray mask let go of me and bolted after him. I dropped to the floor. The rear emergency exit alarm screamed as someone hit the push bar. The whole store filled with that piercing sound. More police lights appeared outside. The two men from the sidecar tried to run. One got tackled near the air machine. Another jumped a fence behind the strip mall and disappeared into the neighborhood. The white mask got out the rear door. The gray mask didn't. An officer caught him halfway through the hallway after he slipped on the wet floor. The black mask was arrested at the front. The white mask was found later that night, hiding behind a dumpster 2 blocks away. The fifth person was never caught. At least not that I know of. Afterward, police told me the group had hit 2 other small stores that month. Same pattern, late night, masks. One person inside, pretending to browse. One near the door, one forcing the employee away from the counter. They used Halloween because it gave them cover. People didn't report masks. People didn't notice dark clothing. People assumed costumes. The officer told me something else. The customer in the pickup had called 911 as soon as he drove away. He had seen the open register and my face. So even if the panic alarm hadn't gone through, help was already coming. I still think about that man. I never got his name. I wish I had. The gas station had security cameras. And later, when I watched the footage with the manager, I saw things I hadn't noticed in the moment. The 3 men had walked in with purpose. The black mask checked the camera placement immediately. The gray mask kept one hand near his pocket from the second he entered. The white mask never once looked at the candy, the drinks, the shelves, anything a normal customer would look at. They didn't come in to shop. They came in to control the room. And for almost 5 minutes, they did. I quit 2 weeks later. I tried one more shift after it happened, but every time the door chimed, my whole body locked up. Every customer in a hoodie made me tense. Every mask decoration in the store made my skin crawl. Halloween used to be my favorite holiday. Now I stay home. I don't go to parties. I don't hand out candy alone. And when I see adults in masks walking into a store after dark, I don't think costume. I think about that white plastic face standing 3 feet from my counter, calmly telling me to open the register. I think about how close I came to being walked into that bathroom. And I think about how easy it was for them. Not because they were clever, because the night made them normal. That's the part people don't understand. A mask isn't always meant to scare you. Sometimes it's meant to blend in. Sometimes the scariest costume is the one nobody questions. And on Halloween, nobody questions a mask until it's already too close. I was guarding a warehouse in the rain. Then I heard the metal door open. People think a security guard's job is to be brave. It isn't. A guard's whole job is to be a witness. To see, to report, to not become part of the story. The night I learned that for real, the smartest thing I did was the thing that felt the most like cowardice. And it's the only reason I'm here to tell it. My name is Hector. I was 51. Working night security at a freight warehouse in the industrial part of Long Beach, California, the sprawl of distribution buildings and container yards near the port. This particular warehouse held high-value electronics, which mattered because it meant the place had real security. Cameras, alarms, a fenced lot, and me in a guard booth doing hourly walkthroughs of a building the size of a few football fields. I'd done this kind of work 20 years. I was not a jumpy man. I'd learned the difference between the 1,000 harmless noises a big building makes and the one that matters. This was a January night, raining hard, the kind of steady, heavy rain Southern California gets a few weeks a year, drumming on the metal roof, sheeting down the big roll-up bay doors along the loading dock side of the building. Loud. That's worth remembering. The rain was loud, and it covered a lot of sound. I'd done my 11 o'clock walk, nothing wrong. I was back in the booth around midnight, rain coming down, when something made me look at the camera monitors more carefully than usual. We had cameras on the loading dock, the row of big roll-up doors where trucks backed in. And on one of the monitors, in the rain-blurred dark of the dock, I thought I saw movement near the farthest bay door. Just a flicker. I watched it. For a minute, nothing. Then again, a shape low by the bottom of that door. Someone was at the dock. Now, 20 years in, here's what I did not do. I did not grab a flashlight and walk down there alone to investigate like a hero. The first thing I did was call it in, the alarm company and the police, right away before anything else. Report first, that's the job. A guard who investigates first and reports second is a guard who becomes a hostage or a body. I called, gave the address, said possible break-in at the loading dock, in progress. Police dispatched. Good. That was the most important thing I did all night, and it took 30 seconds. Then I watched the monitors, because that part, being the eyes, that is the job. And what I saw made the hair stand up on my neck, not because it was loud or violent, but because it was so calm and so practiced. They weren't smashing anything. There were two of them, I could see now, working at the bottom of that farthest roll-up door. And they were quiet and methodical, using tools, working the door's mechanism the way people who'd done this before would. They knew which door. They knew these doors had a weak point. They weren't panicked smash-and-grab kids. They were professionals, and they were patient, and the loud rain was their friend, covering the sound of whatever they were doing to that door. And then, on the monitor, the bottom of the roll-up door lifted. Maybe 3 feet, and the two of them rolled under it, into the building, into my building. The metal door I was supposed to be guarding had just been opened from the outside by people who clearly knew exactly what they were doing. And they were now inside, in the dark of the warehouse floor, with all those high-value electronics, and with me. Here's where every instinct that isn't trained pulls you the wrong way. The untrained instinct says, it's your building, confront them, yell, do something, you're the guard. And I felt all of that. 20 years of this is my post pride pulling me toward the door of that booth. But 20 years of actual experience held me in my chair, because I knew the truth. I was one unarmed 51-year-old man. They were two professionals who just demonstrated they knew exactly what they were doing. The police were already on the way, and the only thing my confronting them would accomplish was turning a property crime into a violent one with me in the middle of it. The electronics were insured. I was not the thing I was there to protect. I was there to witness and report. I'd reported. Now I had to witness and stay alive. So I did the hard thing. I stayed in the booth, lights off, low, and I watched them on the monitors, and I narrated everything to the 911 dispatcher. How many, where they were, what they were doing, which way they were facing. Quiet, calm, useful. The booth was off to the side, near the front, not where they were working. As long as I stayed dark and quiet, I was just a guy in a small room they had no reason to come to. They were here for pallets of electronics near the dock, not for a guard booth up front. But then the thing happened that tests you. One of them. I watched it on the monitor, stopped loading, and stood up straight and looked around the warehouse floor. And then he started walking, not toward the dock, up the main aisle, toward the front of the building, toward the offices and the guard booth, toward me, slow, scanning, like he'd remembered there's supposed to be a guard somewhere, and wanted to know where. Maybe he'd seen the booth light earlier. Maybe it was just procedure for them, locate the guard. But he was walking up my way, in the dark, checking, and I was in a booth with one door and a big window. I have never been so still in my life. I got down below the window line, in the dark, under the little counter in that booth, with my phone screen pressed against my chest so its light wouldn't show, and I listened to a man's footsteps come up the concrete aisle through the sound of the rain and stop, close, right outside the booth. I heard him try the booth door handle, slow. It was locked. I'd locked it, thank God, out of pure habit when I'd gotten back from my walk. The handle turned and stopped. I heard him cup his hands and look through the booth window, inches above where I was folded up under the counter in the dark. And I held my breath and did not move, and did not make a sound and waited to find out if I was about to die over a warehouse full of televisions. and then his footsteps moved away. Back down the aisle, toward the dock. He'd looked into a dark, locked, empty-seeming booth and decided the guard was off doing rounds elsewhere in the building. Or had run, and either way wasn't worth chasing. They had a clock running and pallets to move. He went back to work. The police came about 4 minutes later. Fast for that area, because break-in in progress. Electronics gets priority. And the two of them saw the light bars through the dock doors, and were gone, back under the roll-up door, and out into the rain, and over the fence, and into the maze of the industrial yards before the officers could get around the building. They got away. They got away with a couple of pallets they'd already staged at the door too. Professionals. In and out, and the rain washed away whatever they might have left behind. But I was alive, and I was unhurt, and I'd given the police a real-time account and clear camera footage, which is exactly, precisely, the entire job. My supervisor told me the next day I'd done everything right, that the guards who get hurt or killed are almost always the ones who engaged, who tried to be the hero, who forgot that no warehouse full of merchandise is worth a human life, least of all their own. He said the company would rather lose every TV in that building than get a death notification phone call. The insurance covers the TVs. It doesn't cover me. They were never caught, as far as I ever heard. A professional crew that knew which door, knew the rain would cover them, knew how to be in and gone in under 10 minutes. The kind that does it again and again and never gets caught because they're disciplined and they're patient and they don't panic. And I think that's why the story stays with me. Even though nothing supernatural happened, even though no one even touched me. Because the scariest thing I saw that night wasn't a monster or a ghost. It was competence. It was watching two human beings calmly, patiently, professionally take apart the thing that was supposed to keep them out and walk into a locked building like it was nothing, and come looking for me with the same unhurried calm, and knowing that the only thing that saved me was a locked booth door and the discipline to make myself small and silent and let them have the televisions. The hardest, bravest thing I ever did on that job was nothing at all. I sat in the dark and I let it happen, and I stayed alive to tell what I saw. Sometimes that's the whole job. Sometimes the bravest thing isn't opening the door. It's knowing, when the handle turns in the dark, to stay exactly where you are and make no sound at all. I've made thousands of deliveries in my life, and most of them disappeared from my memory almost as soon as they ended. A house number, a porch light, a bag of food left by a door, a quick have a good night. That's usually all it is. But there is one delivery I still think about every Christmas Eve. Not because anyone chased me, not because I saw a weapon, not because something jumped out of the dark. It was worse than that in a quieter way. It was the kind of delivery where every single detail seemed almost normal until I was already driving away. And then all those details started arranging themselves into something I couldn't explain. My name is Eli. I was 30 when this happened, driving for a pizza place in Duluth, Minnesota. If you've never been to Duluth in late December, it's hard to explain what winter feels like there. The cold doesn't just sit outside. It presses against everything. The streets get lined with snowbanks taller than cars. The wind comes off Lake Superior and cuts right through your coat. At night, when the lake is black and the roads are frozen, the whole city can feel like it's holding its breath. This was Christmas Eve. I was working because the holiday pay was good, and because I didn't really have anywhere else to be. My parents were out of state. My friends had families. I figured I might as well make some money and keep busy. The evening had been steady at first. Families ordering early, people getting last-minute food before everything closed. A few houses with kids running around inside, lights everywhere, Christmas trees glowing in windows. Then, after about 9:30, the orders stopped. That happens on Christmas Eve. At a certain point, everyone is home, the roads empty out, the city gets quiet. By 10, I thought we were done. I had just started wiping down the hot bags when the phone rang. My manager answered it. I remember watching him write something down, then look up at the clock. He covered the receiver and said, "You want one more?" I asked where. He gave me the neighborhood. It was up on the hillside, one of the older parts of Duluth, with steep streets, big old houses, and trees that make everything feel darker than it is. I almost said no. The roads were icy and it was already late. Then he said, "It's just one small cheese pizza. Guy says he'll tip extra because it's Christmas Eve." I shrugged and said I'd take it. The order was simple. One small cheese pizza, nothing else. The name on the ticket was Harold Whitcomb. The delivery note said, "Please knock. I'll be slow to the door." That line stuck with me for some reason, not in a scary way. It sounded like an old person. I pictured some elderly man alone on Christmas Eve who just wanted a small pizza. The thought made the delivery feel less annoying. Kind of sad, honestly. I put the pizza in the hot bag and headed out. The drive up the hill was slow. The streets were slick, and a freezing mist had started coming down, turning every surface shiny under my headlights. Most of the houses I passed were lit up. Warm windows, Christmas lights, wreaths on doors, blue TV glow behind curtains. The address was near the top of a narrow street lined with old homes. I found it after passing the house once and having to reverse because the numbers were hard to see under the snow. The house itself sat back from the road. 2 stories, dark wood siding, a steep roof with snow gathered along the edges, a covered porch across the front. And unlike every other house on the block, it was completely dark. No Christmas lights, no porch light, no lamp in a window, nothing. It looked empty, not just lights off empty. Empty in the way a house looks when no one has been in it for a long time. I sat there for a moment with the car running, the pizza on the passenger seat, checking the address again. It matched. I looked at the order. Harold Whitcomb, please knock. I'll be slow to the door. I tried calling the number attached to the order. It rang and rang, then went to voicemail. The voicemail was just the default automated voice. No name, no message. I thought about marking it undeliverable, but I was already there, and maybe the guy really was elderly and slow to answer. Maybe he had turned the lights off to save money. Maybe he was sitting in a back room where I couldn't see the glow. So I grabbed the pizza and got out. The cold hit me immediately. The street was so quiet, I could hear the freezing mist ticking against the hood of my car. I walked up the front path. That was the first thing I noticed. The snow on the walkway wasn't completely untouched, but it didn't look freshly used either. There were old impressions under a thin crust of new ice. Could have been footprints from earlier. Could have been from Dago. It was hard to tell. The porch steps creaked under me. I knocked. Nothing. I waited. The house stayed silent. I knocked again, louder this time. Still nothing. I was about to set the pizza down and leave when I heard movement inside. Slow footsteps. Very slow. Coming towards the front door. They sounded heavy, like someone dragging their feet across old wood. I remember feeling relieved. Not scared. Relieved. Because it meant there really was someone inside. The footsteps stopped right behind the door. Then a man's voice spoke. Old. Soft. Tired. "Is that the pizza?" I said, "Yes, sir." There was a pause. Then he said, "I'm sorry to make you wait. I don't move so quick anymore." That lined up with the note. I relaxed. I told him it was no problem. He said, "Could you leave it on the porch chair? I don't want to let the cold in. Money's in the mailbox." There was an old metal chair on the porch, off to the side. It had a thin layer of ice across the seat. I set the pizza box on it. Then I opened the mailbox mounted beside the door. There was an envelope inside. My name wasn't on it. Nothing was written on it at all. Inside was cash. Exact amount for the order, plus a $10 tip. The bills were folded neatly. I called through the door. "Got it. Thank you," the old man said. "Thank you for coming all the way out here tonight." His voice had this warmth to it. "Lonely but kind," I said. "Merry Christmas, sir." He was quiet for a second. Then he said, "Merry Christmas. It's good not to be forgotten." I didn't know what to say to that, so I just said, "You take care," he answered. "You too, son." And that was it. I walked back down the steps, through the cold, to my car. At that point, I wasn't scared. If anything, I felt kind of emotional. It was sad. An old man alone in a dark house on Christmas Eve, ordering one small pizza and thanking a stranger for not forgetting him. I got into my car and sat there for a minute with the heater running. Then I looked back at the house. And that's when the first thing bothered me. No light had come on. Not when he walked to the door. Not when he checked who I was. Not when he got the envelope ready. Nothing. The entire house stayed dark. I told myself, maybe he knew the layout well enough to walk in the dark. Older people do that sometimes. Then I looked at the envelope again. The bills inside were old. Not ancient or anything, but older than what you usually see. Soft, worn, folded flat like they'd been sitting somewhere for a long time. One of the bills had an older design I hadn't seen in years. That was odd, but not impossible. Plenty of older people keep cash at home. Then I noticed the smell. The envelope smelled faintly musty, like a drawer that hadn't been opened in a long time. I didn't like that. I put the money in my cup holder and drove back to the shop. My manager was locking up when I got there. He asked if the delivery went okay. I told him yeah, but I mentioned the house being dark. He asked for the address. When I told him, he paused. Not dramatically, just enough that I noticed. Then he said, "That place up on Hawthorne?" I said yes. He frowned and said, "I thought nobody lived there anymore." I laughed a little and said, "Somebody does. I just talked to him." He didn't argue. He just said he grew up in Duluth and remembered hearing something about that house. An old man had lived there alone for years. There had been problems with the property after he got sick. Family out of state, bills unpaid, that kind of thing. I asked if his name was Harold. My manager looked at me strangely. He said, "I think it might have been." That was when I felt the first real chill. I asked what happened to him. My manager said he wasn't sure. He thought the old man had been moved into assisted living, or maybe a hospital, a while back. The house had been tied up with family issues or estate stuff, and had sat empty. He wasn't certain. It was just neighborhood talk. Still, I couldn't shake it. The next morning was Christmas. The shop was closed. I woke up thinking about that delivery. I checked the app system from home, but since it had been a phone order through the shop, there wasn't much to see. Just the name, address, and phone number. I called the number from the ticket. Disconnected. Not voicemail this time. Disconnected. I told myself phone lines get weird, especially with older landlines or forwarded numbers. But I knew that sounded weak. A few days later, when the roads were better, I drove back up to the house in daylight. I don't know why. Curiosity, maybe. Or maybe I needed to see it looking normal. The house looked worse during the day. The paint was peeling near the porch. The gutters were bent. Snow had drifted up against the side door. There were no tire tracks in the driveway. No footprints on the walk, except old half-filled marks that might have been mine from Christmas Eve. The porch chair was there. The pizza box was not. That should have made me feel better. Somebody had taken it inside, but the porch itself didn't look disturbed. The ice on the chair had cracked where I'd set the box, but there were no fresh prints leading from the door to the chair. No smudge in the snow. No sign that the door had opened. I stood there for a while. Then a woman from the house next door came outside and asked if I needed something. I told her I had delivered pizza there on Christmas Eve and wanted to make sure everything was okay. Her face changed immediately. She asked, "To that house?" I said yes. She asked who answered. I told her an older man. She didn't say anything for a few seconds. Then she told me nobody had lived there for months. Not years, like my manager had thought. Months. The old man who owned it, Harold Whitcomb, had died in late fall. Not in the house, she said. At least, not officially. He had been found after a welfare check and taken to the hospital, where he passed away a few days later. His family lived out of state and hadn't done anything with the property yet. I told her that wasn't possible because I'd talked to him through the door. She looked uncomfortable. Then she asked something that made my stomach turn. "Did he ask you to leave it on the porch chair?" I said yes. She put a hand over her mouth. I asked what was wrong. She said Harold used to do that. When he got older and couldn't get to the door easily, he would tell delivery drivers to leave food on that chair and put money in the mailbox. Everyone who delivered in that area knew it. I asked if someone could be staying in the house. A relative, a squatter, anyone. She said maybe, but she hadn't seen lights, cars, or movement there since before Thanksgiving. She also said the utilities were supposed to be off. That was when I decided to call the non-emergency police line. It felt ridiculous, but not calling felt worse. An officer met me there later that afternoon. He was polite, but clearly unsure what to make of it. The neighbor came over and explained what she knew. The officer checked the doors. The front door was locked. The back door was locked. No obvious sign of forced entry. He looked through the windows and said the house appeared empty. He couldn't just break in without a reason. I told him about the order, the voice, the envelope, the money. He took notes. Then he asked if I still had the envelope. I did. I had kept it in my car without knowing why. He looked at it and said there was no address, no name, nothing to connect it to anything. The money was real. Old, but real. He asked if maybe someone had placed the order as a prank. That was the most logical explanation. Someone who knew Harold's old routine could have called in an order, left money in the mailbox earlier, and hidden nearby. But that explanation had problems. Who was inside the house speaking through the door? How did they get in and out without leaving tracks? Why use Harold's name? Why spend money on a prank that nobody would see? The officer didn't say any of that out loud, but I could see him thinking through it. A week later, my manager called me into the office. He had been going through old customer records for tax stuff and found something. Harold Whitcomb had ordered from our shop for years. Always the same thing. Small cheese pizza. Sometimes Christmas Eve. And his delivery instructions had been saved in the old system. Please knock. I'll be slow to the door. The same exact words. That should have explained it. Maybe the order had been placed using an old customer profile, but it didn't explain who called it in that night. The phone number attached to the order had been disconnected. The caller had spoken to my manager. My manager remembered it clearly now, because he said the voice had sounded old and weak, and he had almost felt bad taking the order so late. He said the caller told him, "I know it's late, but I don't want to be forgotten tonight." That was almost exactly what the man had said through the door. My manager stopped talking after that. For a long time, neither of us said anything. I still don't know what happened. I don't know if someone was inside that house. I don't know if a family member came back and recreated Harold's old routine for reasons I can't understand. I don't know if a neighbor placed the order out of pity and someone else happened to be there. I don't know if the simplest this explanation is still a one I never found. But I know what I heard. I know there were footsteps behind that door. I know an old man thanked me for coming. I know the money was in the mailbox before I opened it, and I know the house had been empty since before Thanksgiving. I kept the envelope, not the money. I eventually spent that because I needed gas, but I kept the envelope. I also kept the small scrap of paper that was folded inside it, the one I didn't notice until later that night. It said, "Thank you for not forgetting me." The handwriting was shaky, old. Maybe someone wrote it as part of the prank. Maybe Harold had written it years before and left it somewhere. Maybe I don't want the answer. I stopped delivering pizza the next spring, not because of that one night, but it was part of it. Every Christmas Eve since, I think about that dark house on the hill. I think about the porch chair, the envelope, the footsteps, the voice that sounded grateful in a way that made my chest hurt. It wasn't the scariest thing that ever happened to me, but it was the one that followed me the longest, because most frightening things make you afraid of what might hurt you. That delivery made me afraid of being forgotten. It made me think about all the people who live alone, who order the same small meal from the same place year after year, who leave money in the same mailbox, because it's the only way they still talk to the world. And it made me wonder how long a routine can echo after the person is gone. So now, when I work late on holidays, I try to be kinder than I need to be. I knock when the note says knock. I wait a little longer. I say Merry Christmas even when I'm tired, because I don't know who is really on the other side of the door. I only know that, on one freezing Christmas Eve in Duluth, I delivered a small cheese pizza to a dark house with no lights on. and an old voice thanked me like I was the first person who had come in a very long time, and maybe that is all it was. A lonely old routine, a mistake in a system, a prank no one ever admitted to. But I still remember what he said before I left. It's good not to be forgotten. And every Christmas Eve, when the city goes quiet and the snow starts covering the sidewalks, I remember him, whoever he was. I have had strange deliveries before. Wrong addresses, drunk customers, dark houses. People asking me to come around back when every part of my body told me not to. But this one was different. There was no person at the door, no threat I could point to. No one chased me, no one touched me. I just heard a party inside a cabin where nobody was supposed to be. And after what I saw through that window, I have never been able to convince myself that sound always belongs to the present. My name is Nathan. I was 32 when this happened, doing food delivery in the mountain roads outside Boulder, Colorado. Most of my work was in town, but sometimes orders would take me up into the canyon. Cabins, rental houses, weekend places tucked into the trees. Those trips usually paid well, so I didn't mind them. You learn fast up there that the mountains have a different kind of dark. In the city, darkness still has edges. Streetlights, porch lights, cars, windows. But up in the canyon, once you leave the main road, the dark is complete. Your headlights are the only thing separating the road from everything else. This happened in late winter. It had snowed earlier in the week, but that night the weather had turned into a mix of sleet and cold rain. The roads were slick, the trees were dripping, and fog kept moving through the headlights in slow, white sheets. Around 9:30, I got an order from a pizza place. It was a big order. 4 pizzas, wings, breadsticks, 2 bottles of soda, the kind of order people place when they have a group over. The drop-off was way up a Forest Service road off one of the canyon routes. It was farther than I usually accepted, but the payout was high and the tip looked good. I figured it was a cabin party. That made sense. People rent cabins in the mountains all the time, for birthdays, ski weekends, bachelor parties, whatever. A loud group in the woods ordering way too much food was not strange. I picked up the order and started driving. The first part of the drive was normal. Then I turned off the main canyon road onto the Forest Service road. That was where the world changed. The pavement ended almost immediately. The road became dirt and gravel, half frozen, half mud. It climbed through thick pines in sharp turns. There were no streetlights, no guardrails, no houses close enough to see. Just my headlights, the road, and the dark trees pressing in on both sides. The GPS kept telling me I had another mile, then half a mile, then a quarter. I hadn't seen another car in at least 10 minutes. Finally, the road ended at a small clearing, and there it was, a cabin. Old log walls, steep roof, a covered porch, tall pines all around it, and every window was glowing. Warm yellow light spilled across the snow and wet ground. Before I even turned off the engine, I heard music. Not faintly, clearly. It was coming from inside the cabin. Bass thumping through the walls. People laughing. Several voices talking over each other. That thick, messy sound of a crowded room where everyone is having a good time. I remember smiling because it was exactly what I expected. A party. A big one. The only thing that seemed slightly odd was the lack of cars. There were no vehicles in the clearing. No tire tracks that I could see. No footprints near the porch, except old marks softened by sleet. But I explained it away. Maybe they had parked farther down. Maybe there was another drive around back. Maybe they all came together in one van. I didn't care. I was cold. The food was heavy, and I wanted to get paid. I grabbed the bags and walked up to the cabin. The closer I got, the louder the party became. I could hear individual voices now. A woman laughing hard. A man shouting something I couldn't make out. Someone clapping along to the music. A chair scraping across wood. It sounded completely real. Alive. I stepped onto the porch and knocked hard. The instant my knuckles hit the door, everything stopped. Not slowly. Not like someone lowered the volume. It cut off. Music, voices, laughter, all of it. Gone. The silence that followed was so complete, it felt physical. I stood there holding the food, my hand still raised from knocking. At first, I almost laughed. I thought they were messing with me. A whole party going silent because the delivery guy knocked. Maybe they were drunk. Maybe someone was about to jump out and yell. I waited. Nothing. I knocked again. Still nothing. No footsteps. No voice calling out. No music restarting. Just sleet ticking against the porch roof and my own breathing. The cabin windows were still glowing warm. The place still looked occupied, but now it sounded empty. I called out, "Delivery." No answer. I shifted the bags in my arms and looked toward the front window. There was no curtain, just glass. Warm light behind it. I know I shouldn't have looked, but at that moment, my brain was still trying to keep the world normal. I stepped to the side and looked inside. The room was empty. Not empty like people had stepped into another room. Empty like no one had been there in years. There was an old couch covered with a white sheet. 2 wooden chairs turned upside down on a table. A fireplace full of cold ash. Dust everywhere. The floor had a smooth gray layer across it, completely undisturbed. No cups, no plates, no shoes, no people, no speaker. Nothing that could have made the sound I had just heard. The light was on, but the room it lit looked abandoned. I stood there staring through the glass, trying to force the image to make sense. A second ago, I had heard a room full of people. Now I was looking at a room where nobody had walked recently enough to leave even one track in the dust. I backed away from the window. That was when I noticed the porch. There was a small table near the door. On it was an old ashtray. Inside were cigarette butts that looked ancient, dried out and stained. Beside the ashtray was a stack of playing cards, swollen from moisture, stuck together at the edges. And under the porch roof, hanging by a nail, was a string of faded party lights. Most of the bulbs were dead, but one near the door was glowing weakly. I hadn't noticed it before. I called the customer through the app. It rang from inside the cabin. A phone rang somewhere beyond the door. Old-fashioned ringtone. Loud in the silence. It rang 4 times, then stopped. I looked back through the window. Nothing moved. I called again. This time, the phone rang once. Then someone ended the call. My stomach dropped. That was the first moment I truly felt I should not be there. I set the food down on the porch. I didn't do it carefully. I just lowered the bags onto the boards and started backing away. Then, from inside the cabin, I heard a sound. One laugh. A woman's laugh. Soft, close to the door. Not loud like before. Not part of a party. Just one quiet laugh from the other side of the wall. I turned and walked fast to my car. Not running. I don't know why. Maybe because I was afraid running would make it worse. I got in, locked the doors, and started the engine. The headlights swept across the cabin. The second they did, every light in every window went out. All at once, the cabin became completely dark. No warm glow, no party lights, no porch light, nothing. Just an old black shape in the trees. I reversed too fast, nearly sliding into a ditch, then turned around and drove down that forest road with both hands tight on the wheel. I didn't look in the mirror. I didn't want to know if the lights came back on. At the bottom of the canyon, my signal returned. I pulled over at a turnout and opened the app to mark the order. The order was gone, not completed, not canceled. Gone. There was no record of it in my current deliveries. No customer, no address, no payment. At first, I thought the app had glitched, but the food was no longer in my car. The receipt from the pizza place was still sitting on my passenger seat. I had driven up there. I had delivered something. That much was real. I called support. They were useless. They couldn't find the order connected to my account. They couldn't find the customer. They told me to restart the app. I hung up. I didn't sleep much that night. The next day, I called the pizza place. The same employee who had handed me the order answered. I asked if they remembered the big order going up the canyon. They did. They said it had been paid online, already tipped, name attached to the ticket. The name was M. Keller. That meant nothing to me. I asked if they still had the phone number. They checked. Disconnected. I asked if anyone had ever ordered from that address before. The employees, he said, not that they knew of. That should have been the end of it. But it wasn't. because I couldn't stop thinking about the room, the dust, the phone ringing inside, the laugh after I set the food down. A few days later, in daylight, I drove back up. I know that sounds stupid. It probably was. But I needed to see the cabin as a normal place. I needed the boring explanation. Maybe there was another room. Maybe the party had been in a basement. Maybe I had looked into the wrong window. Maybe the people were just messing with me. I found the Forest Service road. It looked worse in daylight, narrower, older, less traveled. When I reached the clearing, the cabin was there, but it looked nothing like it had that night. No lights, no warmth, no sign anyone had been there. The porch sagged on one side. The windows were dirty. The door had an old padlock on it, a real one, rusty, locked from the outside. That was when my skin went cold, because I had knocked on that door. I had heard a phone ring behind it. I had heard someone laugh inside, and now there was a padlock on the outside that looked like it had not been touched in years. I walked up to the porch. The food was gone. No pizza boxes, no bags, no bottles, nothing. But on the porch boards where I had set everything down, the dust and old dirt had been disturbed. There were fresh marks. Not footprints exactly. More like drag marks, as if the bags had been pulled toward the door. I looked through the same front window. The room was exactly as I remembered. Sheet-covered furniture, dust, old fireplace, no speaker, no phone, no sign of a party. Only one thing was different. On the table, beside the swollen deck of playing cards, there was a paper plate, clean, white, new-looking, sitting in the middle of all that dust. I left after that. I reported it to the county sheriff's office, though I felt ridiculous doing it. A deputy called me back later that week. He said the cabin was private property tied up in an estate dispute. It had been vacant for years. Nobody was supposed to be there. He also said they had received occasional reports about lights up there. Not often. A hunter once, a hiker another time. Someone had claimed they saw the cabin lit up from the road late at night. But when deputies checked, it was dark and locked. He said it was probably teenagers or squatters. Maybe it was. But he didn't sound fully convinced. Before hanging up, he asked me one more question. He asked if I had heard music. I said yes. He was quiet for a moment. Then he told me that years earlier, before the property got tied up in court, the cabin had belonged to a family that used to host gatherings there every winter. Big parties. Neighbors, friends, music, food, cards. One winter, something happened. He didn't give details. He only said there had been an accident on the road during bad weather, after one of those parties, and after that, the cabin was never really used the same way again. The family eventually stopped coming. Then the owner died. Then the estate froze, and the cabin sat empty. I asked him if Keller meant anything, the name on the order. He said he didn't know. But a few days later, I looked through old property records. The family name attached to the cabin was Keller. That was enough for me. I never went back. I stopped taking mountain orders after dark. Eventually, I stopped delivering altogether. But every winter, when the sleet starts hitting the windows and I hear music from a house down the street, I think about that cabin. I think about how real the party sounded. Not distant, not imagined, real. I think about the way it stopped the second I knocked. That may have been the worst part, because the silence felt aware. It didn't feel like an empty room going quiet. It felt like a room full of people had all turned to look at the door. At me, like I had interrupted something. I don't know what I believe. Maybe someone was inside. Maybe they had a key. Maybe they used a speaker and an old phone and somehow made the order disappear. Maybe some people get bored enough to scare delivery drivers in the mountains. That explanation is possible. I try to believe it, but then I think about the padlock, the dust, the dead phone number, the paper plate on the table, and the lights going out all at once. I think some places hold on to things. Maybe not ghosts, maybe not anything dramatic, just moments. A room full of laughter, a winter party, music in a cabin. The kind of night people want to last forever. And maybe sometimes, under the right weather, on the right forgotten road, those moments play again. Not for us, not for anyone living, just for the place itself. That is what it felt like the cabin was remembering. and I had knocked on the door while it was doing it. So if you're ever delivering late in the mountains, and the GPS takes you to a bright cabin at the end of a road where there are no cars, and you hear music and laughter inside, don't assume the party is for you. Don't knock. Don't look in the window. Leave the food if you have to. Then get back in your car and drive away, because some parties are not happening now. Some houses are not as empty as they look, and some doors, when you knock on them, don't open. They just let everything inside know you're there. If you made it this far, thank you for staying in the dark with me. If you want more stories like these, black screen, soft rain, and true fear that keeps you listening all night, leave a like and subscribe. I'll be here with more. Sleep well, if you can.